Hey everyone, welcome. Good morning. So glad to have you here with us. Looking forward to, as always, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement here in the live stream. Go ahead and let George and I know where you're chiming in from. Already seeing several people connect there on LinkedIn, letting us know that you're listening in. We're so glad to have you here with us, whether you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, all those places. And Facebook said it may be giving us a weird little error there. I'm going to double check that in a minute when we get a break. George, glad to have you here, my friend. Welcome.
As always, I am excited to be here, joining all our faithful people that are watching all over from everywhere. We got people coming all the way from Florida to Connecticut, Seattle. So we got a good stretch. Pennsylvania, shout out to them. And of course, to all my Ohio people out there, OH. And good to see everybody out there today. I'm excited, man. It's Thursday, but I feel like it's the energy of a Friday or a Saturday, and I'm really excited. I'm with a lot of our alumni from our HRCI school as well. So I am very excited to be here. And of course, can't go wrong when you have Ben on the other end.
Oh, goodness. Well, we're going to have some fun today. We're going to share some great conversations with some leaders and some incredible data as well. I'm so excited to go back and forth with you on that, George, later on to share some of the findings and things. So all of you out there listening, listen, we all know performance management, sometimes the way we do it doesn't always work. Sometimes we want to have better engagement with our people. We always are thinking about how do we create better retention and connection with people. And so we're going to go through some of the things that employers are doing right now on that front. It was fun because last fall we had a chance to share some of this data from the employee side. Here's what they're looking for, what they need. And this time we'll share a little bit of a compare and contrast to show you how we may be on the same page or not with our workforce, but also showing you some things that you can do based on what other companies are doing. So some of the most trending and competitive practices when it comes to managing and supporting employee performance, all that good stuff is here. And again, all of you know, if we're going to talk about culture, George has got to be in the room, whether physically or virtually, because that's his life's blood over there. So I'll share really quickly some of our announcements and things really quick to get us up and running. So if you have joined us before, you know what to expect. If you have not, welcome. We're glad to have you. This is going to be high energy, a lot of fun. We're going to have a great time to get together today and really get some good takeaways and lessons learned. All right. As always, so there's a thank you to our sponsors for supporting the event. You'll hear from some of their speakers and partners today, their customers today. So it's some good conversations as we go through across things like employee experience, recognition, performance, all of those kinds of things. As always, stay engaged. We'll be doing giveaways at the very end of the day. So if you're here with us today, stick around all the way to the end, stay in the comments, share your learnings, ask questions. Goodness, when George and I are sharing towards the end, we'll have some data. Ask questions about what we're seeing or what you think might be helpful for your kind of company, or you've got this leader who's kind of sticky over there and how do we, work around that? Bring it in. We'll be looking there at the chat. We'll follow those and we'll try to make sure and weave those back in. And all of that engagement gets you an opportunity to win some amazing prizes. Really quickly, I'll show you. So a couple unique things today. Usually we give away, last year we gave away a lot of my books, George's books. This time around, we're going to do something kind of fun. We're giving away some of our HR belonging shirts, the ranch dressing of HR, pour some belonging on all of it, and it makes it better. And even if you're not a ranch fan like me, there's something fun. So one of our friends out there in the HR Summer School audience, Kelsey Beckfield, wrote a kid's book called I Want to Work in Human Resources right there. And so we've got a whole box of these we bought from Kelsey to give away to all of you that are, again, being engaged and everything else. I was telling George the other day, like HR has a PR problem sometimes, like all the news, all the stories. Why would HR let this thing happen is what the headlines will say. Or in the movies, it's always something terrible. It's like a stereotype. Like we need to start from the ground up and tell a different story. And so Kelsey's educating the next generation, literally. And we're going to help her out with that by getting some of these into the hands of our friends out there. So that's some of the giveaways we're doing today. We'll be sharing the SHRM credits, HRCI credits after the fact. This is a 2.5 hour session overall. And then if you're stuck on LinkedIn, sometimes they have some weird, strange issues. And some of you jump over all the way to YouTube, to Facebook to be able to follow the stream. Perfectly fine. If you comment there, we can still bring that right in, just like George is doing with some of the comments here to make you part of this discussion. So if you're there, don't just watch passively. Chime in. You can still get credit. You can still be a winner of some of the prizes towards the end there as we're giving those away. So we would just love to have you here with us. We'll post those links in the chat shortly. So you have those. You should have them in the email notifications and confirmations for the event. But if you're having trouble, just let us know. We'll make sure and get you the right link to join in the right place. Okay, what else we have here coming up? So how about our agenda? that's a priority here. So today we're going to be covering some really good ground. We're going to start off with this amazing keynote panel shortly. We're going to hear from Dana Olam-Vucelich, who's the CHRO for Ohio Living. So another shout out to our friends in Ohio, as well as Brock Edwards. He's a summer school adjunct professor in the past, and he's coming back to join us again and talk about his work as the director of learning and leadership at Baylor University. And they're bringing together some of the things that all of us care about. How do we create a better workplace for the people that we're here to serve? It's a great conversation there with those two. Good takeaways and kind of aha moments. So we're going through again. Let us know what those aha moments are for you. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll transition over, have some great interviews as we're going through. I'll give you more notes on what to expect from all of those. But I think I'm like pumped and ready to go. So George, any last closing comments, anything else you want to share before we dive into the good stuff today?
Yeah, just I'm encouraged. I always get encouraged being with the comments, and everybody's already live in there now. I'm looking for that, I'm looking for that ranch dressing, type of a comment. Of course, everybody's asking the shoes, so I'm just going to go ahead and put them out there. I think I've worn these before, but these are the East Bay Dunks, a little bit transparency, so I got some cool socks you can wear on. But those are the shoes of the day for those who are asking about the shoes. I'll just let those go there. I won't wear them. We'll just enjoy the shoes in there. But about the research bit, I'm really excited about the balance. The employer side of it versus the employee side of it. How are they speaking? Are we communicating to each other rightly? So I'm looking forward to the chat. So make sure you comment. Let's see what the words of the day are.
All right. Awesome. Thanks. All right. Here we go, everybody. We're going to dive in. This first conversation, opening panel keynote here with Brock and Dana. Let's get out of the way and make it happen. Welcome to the session of the day. We're so glad you're here with us, and we're really looking forward to diving into some of the key things that we're seeing across the landscape, like employee engagement, performance, recognition, some of those big things we're going to talk through with our amazing panel here today, and just get the event started, cast kind of a broad net across what's happening out there. So I have here with me Dana Olam-Vucelich. She's the CHRO for Ohio Living. And I also have my good friend, Brock Edwards, who is the Director of Learning and Leadership from Baylor University. So Brock, Dana, glad both of you are here and excited to dive into some good stuff. Before we get into some of the things, Dana, would you take just a minute, tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, and then I'll pass it over to Brock so they can get a little bit of a feel for who they're listening to before we dive in.
Sure. Dana Olam-Vucelich. I've served Ohio Living going on my 24th year. We're in the aging services business. We follow the full continuum of care from independent living to assisted living, memory care, externally palliative medicine, home health, hospice, and we serve over 70,000 Ohioans, and we have 2,500 amazing employees.
Awesome. Wonderful. Brock?
All right. Well, I'm Director of Learning Leadership at Baylor University, so really oversee the professional leadership development of primarily staff here.
You made that so short and so sweet, Brock. Like, why learning development of all the things you can do?
Well, it's my favorite thing to do. Actually, I just love human potential. It's fascinating. I love seeing the light bulbs go off. I love seeing people connect with how they can be more successful, however they define success, whatever it is in their world that they're trying to do. How can we help them do it even better? And so I don't know. That's a fun space to be in.
It absolutely is. Yes. You and I share a love of like ultra sports and things like that. And so we always look at that. What's the edge of human potential and what's possible? So I'm training for a big race like that right now. So it's top of mind for me these days. All right. So let's dive into this good stuff. I know the audience is excited to hear from both of you. So Dana, I'm going to throw this first question at you just to get us started. One of the things that we're going to cover in our research a little bit later today is some of the things that we're seeing, how companies are trying to approach performance, how they're trying to enable and support performance for their people. But one of the things that most of us probably could agree on is that in general, it's mostly a hated process in a lot of companies and how it's approached. And I'd love to hear from you. Why do you think that is? What's driving that?
Well, I have to tell you, myself, in the multiple decades I've been in human resources, I have poked and prodded all things performance management more than I've poked any other part of my business. And it's because, I guess, to your point, nobody likes it. And even though I've written a host of them myself, I still don't like it. I still don't like doing them. And when I sit with my team, even my highest performers, there's always something that I walk away going, right? And so we have tweaked it in our organization to be more conversational, more prompts to build relationship. And I think that when you think that you're doing it at someone, you don't like it. But if you can create a way to do it with someone and building the relationship and moving in that direction, then I think we kind of turn it just a little bit.
I was speaking the other day to a group of HR leaders, and I said, one of the things that I learned when talking about us working with managers, because we always often talk about the challenges there, like so often it's like this, I want this. They say that they're not getting that. And I know a gentleman who's a marriage counselor. He said, listen, relationships change, whether it's at home, at work, when we stop fighting against each other and start fighting together for something we believe in. So it's kind of what I took from your share there. Like, one of the key things is, like, we've got to go together and try to figure out how to solve this thing, instead of saying, let me tell you the things that you aren't very good at, Dana. I want to list these things out. You got a few minutes, because it's going to take a while. Okay. Like, that's a different approach there.
Because the truth is, all of us can list all the things that aren't good about us on our own without a great deal of assistance.
Yes. No support needed there, actually. So, Brock, if that's true, I think, I believe in what Dana's sharing here. If that's the case, what's it going to take for us to change this? How are we going to get that sort of turned around?
So we've got this weird paradox here, don't we? Where, and we have this paradox for everyone, right? So we've got employees. As employees, I think all of us want to be successful, right? We all want to know when we're on track. We don't want to be off track. We don't want to be doing work that doesn't matter, that no one cares about. We want to celebrate our success. We want to get even better in the future. And so we want all that, but we don't like feedback. I want all that. And yet when someone says, hey, Brock, one of my client groups had some feedback for you, I'm like, and it's even when it's good, we get that clench. And managers, they want their employees to be great. And yet many of them are not good at giving feedback. And by the way, their employees probably aren't good at receiving the feedback. And they're often having to deliver feedback that they should have given before. And most people don't like delivering bad news. And then from the HR perspective, we've got this process that we spend a tremendous amount of time rolling out to everyone that it turns out no one wants to do. And they're not happy about having to do it. And so we've got this weird thing where there's some great benefits, and yet all of us on some level kind of oppose it. There's goodness that can come out, but it's really not surprising that the average person isn't a super fan of this process. And so I don't know, Ben, that was a long way for me to get to your question here, but I guess what changes it is really creating cultures around giving, seeking, and receiving feedback, and doing it on a regular basis. I always feel like the performance review should be the dullest, most anticlimactic conversation you have all year, because you're really just encapsulating everything that you've already discussed, right? It's when it's not dull that it gets painful. And so what can we do to change that? From HR perspective, strongly encourage weekly one-on-one meetings where feedback is given, performance is discussed, wins are celebrated. Simplify the processes. It's funny how often we expect people to be highly proficient at a process they do once a year. And so, if we want people to do something, I was told once, we need to make it as easy as possible for them to do. And so where we can't simplify, we need to increase communication and service to make it easier to understand the whys and the hows to do it. I don't know, Dana, what's your take on that?
Yeah, Brock, I was smiling when you said it should be the most anticlimactic conversation, and what an aim, what a personal aim. And if other people want to share that, then what are the steps that they're going to do to make it happen? I like how you said weekly. One of the things inside our organization, job-focused development plans, it sounds more formal than what it is, but it's just what I was saying. It's our values, and it's prompted questions about building the relationship. But I can tell you, even in these very well-intentioned people who work inside the not-for-profit arena with me, they're like, quarterly, Dana, who has time for that? Don't you know we're running a business, we're taking care of people. Yeah, we don't have time. And so I think they're creating their own anxiety. And I like how you said that. So I think our challenge is how are we trying to take the sting out of it? How are we trying to create the impact and just the conversational piece? And so one of the things I even did was say, okay, can I give you a little prompted question? And you walk out on the floor, and maybe you pull an aide or a nurse aside, and you're like, oh man, I was standing over there. One of the things you were doing today, I just got so ramped about. I saw you with this connection, this interaction, more of that. And hey, I know this has been a challenge for you. How do I help come alongside of you in this other area? So it's kind of like a check and a challenge and a feel good, a sincere feel good. I think that's what recognition should be. It's just the complement of the person and what they're doing to bring value towards that directed engagement. We all want happy people at work. We want engaged people at work, but we need directed engagement to get back to our organizational needs.
Yes.
So yeah, thanks for the prompt.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm thinking we don't want someone whistling through the hallways happy that's not doing their actual work and getting the things accomplished, right? There's still, in your case, there's patients to serve. In Brock's case, there's people to teach, there's people to instruct, there's students to support, right? In the university context. So all of us have an outcome we're trying to shoot for there. I'm so glad you at the very end there, Dana, you tied recognition back into that, because one of the big things we're going to release in the data in just a little while is when we ask employers, what are you doing within your performance practice? What pieces of that really matter? The number one way that they're influencing performance and weaving that back together is by recognizing good work. They're using recognition as a tool instead of saying, let me list the things that you're not good at, or let me point out those challenges. Hey, 6 months ago, you did this wrong. You've probably done it wrong every time since then, but I haven't told you about it yet. Like all those kind of things that we know are it's kind of silly to say that out loud. And yet we know it's probably happening somewhere today in some organization out there. And so companies that are leaning into this are saying, hey, the number one thing we're doing is recognition. We're really looking at something that Brock said earlier, not just how to help you fill up your gaps from yesterday, but how to help you be better tomorrow than you were today. I'd love to hear from you, Dana. Anything else you want to share there on recognition and how that ties into the performance piece?
A prompt that you got me to is the same thing. My undergrad is in child development and gerontology, easy for me to say. But in child development, some of the more current research talks about if you have a kid who's getting great grades, say all A's, and then you're like, oh, but look at this C in math. And you give every ounce of energy to attacking that C and what they could do to get better and not have that C. Instead, you're missing out on where they're thriving and contributing at the highest value and probably where their career objectives are lined up. Is if we could look at that in our workplace and say, who's thriving in what space versus, the square peg in the round hole, but, managing to the uniqueness of the one as it relates to trying to go back to our business outcomes. So I don't know if I answered your question, but you got me all excited about thinking how to make it relevant and maybe change our thinking versus coming up with a one size fits all.
Yes. One size fits one. That's what we found. Probably most of our HR practices. It's really hard to build something for everybody because everyone's so unique there. Brock, anything that you want to add in on the recognition side before we talk about broader engagement?
Yeah, well, I love that piece about the making it relevant to them. So thank you for that, Dana. I think that's one of the problems is when it's not tied to anything, when it's done as kind of a checkbox program and it's done, at the organization level versus at the department manager level. Not saying it shouldn't be done at the organization level, but someone 12 levels above me saying, hey, thank you to everyone in the company, that doesn't hit quite as hard as my manager pulling me aside and say, hey, I really appreciate your effort on this piece here. Mm-hmm. I recall years ago, so I'm doing some work with a manufacturing big corporation, and they did a little simple reward anytime they hit their numbers, like the team got a little pizza party. But the impact of it was in the break room from the employee's point of view, every now and then some pizza would show up. They never knew what it was for or why they were getting it, but they got free pizza. So, yay us. It was such a good attempt that missed the mark so much. And I think so often we do that because we remove it from that human level where it really makes an impact.
I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, as you're saying, like you didn't say this either, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Don't hear this anyone out there listening right now for your leadership to say, hey, listen, the team came together. You really pulled it out. You made this happen. And like we hit our deadline. Great job as a team. But that shouldn't be the only thing that happens. It needs to filter down to Brock. On this, we would not have hit this deadline if you had not done this thing. And I appreciate you for working extra that Thursday because I know that it was, it was a long week for you, but you made it happen. Thank you so much. Like being able to go back and filter that down to the individuals. The thing I do like about those leaders doing that is it's the reminder, it's the indicator, it's the sort of cue for everybody else to say, oh yeah, I need to continue flowing this down to the people who made this happen instead of just letting that substitute for whatever personal interaction there is, because pizza showing up in the break room is a great visual example of like, I don't know what it is, but I'm hungry. So yay, without knowing the significance, like the leadership probably thought, oh, this is going to motivate them. Like, I'm just not hungry anymore. That's the only thing that really checked off for us. So good one. Okay. Brock, I want to come back to you for this one, actually, because I think that I know your work involves, you mentioned leadership development at the beginning, learning is a focus for you, something that you care deeply about. How does learning fit into this bigger conversation about performance at work? I know you kind of gave us a clue on that, like help you perform better, but is there a way that we should be thinking about coupling those things together or more tightly integrating learning when we're talking to someone, whether in an individual one-to-one context or more broadly as HR leaders listening in here?
Yeah, so let me back up a little bit here, Ben. I want to share just a couple of philosophies that kind of,
Okay.
for me, kind of drive this. I feel like our role in learning in all of HR really is to help people make better decisions so they can take better actions and get better results. I mean, I wish I invented that. I think a global VP of Pepsi said something to that effect in an HR magazine like a decade plus ago, but it stuck with me. And so I try and look at everything through that lens. And in doing so, and this kind of touches on some of the other things we were talking about before, I want to make everything Amazon one-click simple with service levels of Nordstrom. And that is aspirational, but there is nothing easier than buying something from Amazon. And so we do it. They make it easy, so it's super easy to do. In fact, you almost have to resist doing it. And then, Nordstrom, I don't know where they are now, but, a few years ago, they were kind of the pinnacle of customer service. So I always try and look at things through a customer service lens. And so when we talk about learning, two key philosophies for me is one, you cannot improve organizational performance until you improve individual performance. Cannot do it. We try to find all sorts of ways to avoid that, but that's the case. Until individuals get better, the teams don't get better. When teams get better, departments get better, and it cascades. And the only purpose of learning, from my perspective, is to increase performance. Like, that's it. And so now that's not learning in general. There's a lot of great reasons to learn. But when we think about it from an organizational perspective, the things that we're investing in need to be increasing performance, or at least intending to increase performance. I know sometimes, measuring that's a little sketchy sometimes, but that should be the intention. And I even think about that from a compliance perspective, where compliance training and learning may not improve performance, but it prevents us from decreasing it by not doing those things that would, lead to decreased performance. So we are providing the knowledge and the decisions and the actions. And learning takes many forms. I'm a learning guy, but it doesn't have to be about the L&D team or HR. It's conferences, self-learning from books, blogs, YouTube. I think most importantly, when we think about it's, learning on the job from the manager and from peers and challenging assignments and stretching skills in a supported way. In my perspective, it's really the manager caring about the employee's career and helping create that future success. Now, I'll also add that not every case of poor performance has to do with learning. While I think learning is important to performance, learning won't fix a lot of things. And, we often see that managers want to use classes or training as a bandage for disengagement or other symptoms of poor management. And learning will not fix that at all. When people come to me about, hey, we need to get this employee in a class, I usually have a lot of questions before we even talk about the class. And, because there's a lot that could be getting in the way. It's, most people as adults, you manage to get your pants on, you manage to get to work in the morning. And if you're working from home, you may have only did one of those things. I don't know, but you're at work, you're showing up. Most of life experience tells you what you need to know and what you need to do. Barring some very technical things, most people probably know what they need to do. It's just they don't always do it. So learning can help us find better ways to implement that knowledge that we already have. But it's not always just new knowledge that's keeping people from doing what needs to get done. I don't know. I felt like I was rambling on there a little bit. Dana, what's your take on that?
Oh, what you got me thinking about is back to what the root is. I love how you challenge people who want to push towards education, because sometimes for us as leaders, right, it's the easier path. If I have to look you in the eye and say, I think we actually have an attitudinal issue versus a learning gap. If I have to rise as the leader to call that out or to say, why do you think, if I'm observing this, do you agree or do you disagree? And how can we tackle what it really is? Or if you are feeling disengaged, may I understand better? And then create my own vulnerability. Is there something that I'm doing or saying or getting in your way? Or have I not held other people accountable that you're working alongside? And so I think in hearing what you said, it made me be mindful of getting deeper into going back to managing to the one. So I can't wait to see the rest of your research, Ben. What has you most excited about what's coming?
One of the things that stood out for performance and that connection on learning was coaching for development was a big part of that. You know, it still was in the top 5 this time around. It was. So what's fun for me is we measured this 7 years ago. And I'm kind of curious because all the conversations then were like, it was the first time people were like really saying, let's get away from once a year and go to multiple sessions. And that trend really started, 7 to 10 years ago. And so I was curious to see how things were going to change. And we saw that absolutely come out where more companies said, just that once a year thing is not as big of a priority. These other things, more frequent, more common interactions, like, forgive me, one of you a minute ago mentioned like one-to-ones, like those kinds of things came out as a higher priority for companies because they've realized, listen, behavior change is hard. Getting someone to do something they don't want to do, getting someone to do something different than what they've done in the past, those are the hardest things that we have to do as HR leaders. Brock, I knew you'd appreciate this. One of my good friends, Ben Seeke, he's been on HR Summer School with us in the past. He's the head of learning at Delta Dental. And one of his sayings that has stuck with me is, everyone says you can lead a horse to water, but can you make it drink? He says, I'm going to figure out how to make the horse thirsty first. And I think that's a great connection here. Like on the learning side, like I can just give you learning and you're going to like it, or I can make you want to participate. I can make you excited. Like, hey, here's the vision of what you could be. And here's what's going to take to get there. And I'm not pointing out your gaps and your flaws and your problems, but we see you being successful, but you're going to need these tools in your belt in order to get there. And that's what I was hearing from you, Brock. You're talking about those things. Like this is very forward looking, very, very forward focused. I think that's the big transition that we saw. One of the questions we asked in the research is your approach to performance backward looking, or is it forward facing? Which one is it? And so I love saying the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield for a reason. Let's spend less time looking back and more time looking forward at how to help Dana be better, help Ben be better, help Brock be better tomorrow. And that's coaching, that's recognition, it's all these little things that we tie in together. So awesome. Dana, I want to come back to you and ask a question. What do you, or what does your team do? What do your managers do? Like you can pick your lens there. What do you think helps some of the best performers on your team do their great work day in, day out consistently?
I think the connection to what matters. And so, for example, we always have our values weaving through everything that we do. So we have 7 core values at Ohio Living. So when you're a new employee, you're learning about who we are and what we're aspiring you to share in our value system. Then at your performance appraisal, you're actually evaluated. Everyone, including the CEO of the company, is evaluated against those values. If you're manager and above, you're also evaluated against specific performance outcomes, but it's a 50-50 kind of split. And so for me, just weaving in and why does it matter? And so even in the way we practice thanking people, Ben, I want to thank you for setting up this meeting today. You were organized. I felt more prepared. I felt able to deliver on the things that were important and have a good teaching experience for the group that was there. And so at the end of it, you'd be like, I know exactly why Dana appreciated what I did because I did this, or a timeout. I sought to see if this was a convenient time. And Brock and Dana had some comfort level meeting each other, for a few minutes ahead of time, all those kinds of things that were important to me. So now you know what you did. I've tied it back. Why is it important? Why does it matter? And how do I show appreciation? So we literally practice the thanks, and then we try to build the thanks into recognition. So it's shared, but then into the evaluation. So it's repeated and practiced.
Brock, I love that example, and I thank you for the kind words. By the way, I've worked hard on it. Brock, that brings it up because you talked about practice, and as someone who focuses on leadership developments, you know better than anyone that it's not as simple as, here's your slide deck, you're a great leader, go be great. Like there's a lot of practice involved. There's a lot of getting those skills built. So would you talk for a minute about some of the key skills that when you and the Baylor University team are thinking about a great leader, what are some of the skills that stand out as they've got to have these things in order to excel and perform here? And then how do we actually develop those in people? Because it's not as simple as telling them what they are. There's some other pieces involved in actually getting there. And that's what you do every day. So I know we could spend a lot of time on it, but share with us what you can there, because I think that's important.
Yeah, and I mentioned a little bit before, one of the big things that comes to mind is really around feedback. Can you give it? Can you receive it? Is it supported on your team? Like, do peers give each other feedback on your team? Do your employees give you feedback as a leader in there. And so often, even just teaching them a feedback model, just being able to say, because feedback is often glossed over. It's high level, hey, great job, thumbs up. Fantastic. I love it when people tell me that, but I really don't know what I did. As Dana was saying, if you want me to do it again, it's helpful if you say, here's what you did that I thought was fantastic. If you don't want me to do it, telling me, Brock, you really screwed up there. Okay. Doesn't help me. What did I mess up? And more importantly, what would you want me to do in the future?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of what's the behavior? What's the impact? I think so often people don't even know the impact of their behavior. And then what would you need me to do in the future? And focused on what you need me to do versus what you don't want me to do. Because there's a billion things you don't want me to do. There's only a couple things you really want me to do. So direct me down that path. And so if we can get managers doing even that piece, those regular conversations, so people know when they're on track, off track, and a very human conversation around it. It's not something we're sending via email, that there should be some sort of dialogue there, a chance for questions, a chance for feedback. There's a lot of skills out there that make great leaders, but just kind of, if we can start there, that's fantastic. If they can,
I'm sorry.
Oh, jump in, Dana.
No, you got me excited about I thought about the Crucial Conversations book and about when we could get off track. So if there's a chance that I could get off track and all of a sudden you feel disrespected and disenfranchised and whatever, the most important thing I can come as a supervisor prepared, knowing I'm the one in the room who has more power. How can I bring the conversation back to respect? Because once you feel disrespected, now the new conversation is not about my performance appraisal. It's about the disrespect or the disenfranchisement I feel. And so how can we strengthen? How can we be our best to say, this is at the end of the day, I want this person walking out of this room going, yay, Ohio Living, yay, Dana, yay, my skill set. I got more in me and I'm ready to go. You get fired up, Brock. You got thinking about it.
I think two things that leaders always need to communicate is vision and optimism. And whether we're talking about the corporate level, the organization level, or even the individual level, some of my best leaders saw more in me than I saw in myself, and they were able to communicate that to me. And, that optimism, where even if we're not there, even if we're facing challenges, I know we can get you there. I know that we can get there as a team. Just no one wants to follow Eeyore. We want to do good work, and we want to know that it matters. You never want to you never see a leader pull the team together and say, team, this is going to take some late nights, a lot of hard work. And in the end, no one's going to care. So give it your best, right? Like that doesn't work. We've got it. I think people want to do good work and they want to know that their work has impact.
Yes.
And we don't always see the connection. I think good leaders are able to make those connections for people and acknowledge the hardship. And never saying, blind optimism, but acknowledge the hardships in a way that we know we can get there. We'll figure it out.
I've appreciated the balance for the things you've shared, Brock, between the leadership, the highest levels of leadership in the organization. These things do matter still, but it's a little different context, but it still applies at that personal level. One of the ways I've put that in the last year or so is everybody talks about things like workplace flexibility, or they talk about inclusion is important to us as a company. That's a soundbite from a leadership, snippet. That's a whatever. It actually works or doesn't work at that personal level with a supervisor that you have. If they're like, oh yes, flexibility is important. As long as you're here at 7 a.m., that's all that matters. But flexibility is totally good with me. Or inclusion is great, but we're not going to hire that kind of person because they make me feel a little bit uncomfortable. So it matters at that level, and it's a relationship at that point. It's not just a policy. It's not just a decision. It's like, this is how we interact with each other as humans. And if you're working, using these things, using the tools that Dana's talking about here on how to recognize someone with real care and authenticity and seeing them for who they are. And Brock sharing about, and I believe that with these things together, tomorrow you're going to be even more amazing than you are today. You're great, but you're going to be even greater. Like those two things paired together, it's just an incredible place to be. I want to spend the next 45 minutes asking y'all more and more questions, but I know we've got to transition on to our next session shortly. Thank you so much to both of you. I'm going to make sure and get your links to your LinkedIn profiles here into the chat so the audience can reach out and connect with you. Everybody out there, make sure you just say, hey, saw you on the session, saw you share about employee engagement and feedback and whatever you want to say in there, but don't just blindly hit connect. They want to know who you are. So let them know. Dana, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you so much for joining us.
Welcome. Thank you.
Brock, you're a great man. Thankful to know you and appreciate you for spending some time with us today.
Great to be here. I love this conversation.
Absolutely. To everybody else out there, keep having the conversation in the chat. Let me know what your key takeaways were from this session. It's okay. Dana and Brock are our friends. They're not going to be favorites. So just tell us what you learned from this one, and we're going to transition over to the next one shortly. Hang tight. All right. I hope you got some good takeaways from that one. The chat's super active. All of us getting some great ideas. I told you you'd love it. I love the different perspectives there. And as I said during the session, like there were like some of the things that the way that Brock approached it from company and individual levels, talk about potential of people and really focusing in there. And then Dana is like, goodness, she's brilliant. She's super pleasant. And she's in the chat, like chiming in and being extra helpful, extra friendly today. So love and appreciate them for supporting us. George, I know I can see on my end, the audience can't tell this, but I can tell when George sees a comment that he likes because he's over here like highlighting them in the background. So George, what were some of the things that you saw come through during that session that were like, boom, that's my thing?
Probably the latest one that really kind of hit me at home was Mr. Pessimistic Eeyore comment. That's probably my favorite. So that one really stood out because it's so true. Nobody wants to follow somewhere that's not going somewhere. We all, when it comes to the decision of, hey, I want to follow this person, whether you say, hey, I want you to mentor me, I want you to coach me. No one wants to follow Eeyore. No one wants to follow this pessimistic, gloomy nature of a person. And so that is something that's very true. And it's also something that's encouraging for us and to be an encourager for other people, right? Is that we all have those days where we are gloomy, we have life, we have the uncertainty of life and those things. And so having that, some of the other things being that really stood out to me, and it's been something that's been on my mind since the beginning of this year, and that's the whole feedback, right? And this is just Georgism again. So here's Georgism, George Bomb from the beginning, is that I realize, and it's just wording. There's nothing wrong with giving feedback. But what if we gave feed forward? Just a thought here. Think about this. If we were giving feed forward, because oftentimes for me, I don't want to go backwards towards anything. I know what I've done was wrong. I know what happened. I can't fix it. I can't change it. But what is the feed forward? Right? It's just the different words, and there's no play to say, hey, don't use feedback anymore. But it's the same difference of a perspective of, do I want to sit down and give somebody constructive criticism? No, we want to give constructive feedback, right? And so what if we give them feed forward? This is moving forward. What did you learn from this? The mistake that you made, or, hey, this is some things that are changing. Do I understand that you don't understand something that you're expected to do? So when we're talking about managing, leading, leadership development, feedback, giving people feed forward, giving them something to say, hey, moving forward, this is something that I really encourage you to do, and really check in with people. And Ben, you know this. I always say, when you don't check in with your employees, eventually your employees will check out. And so having that constant feedback, one-on-ones, it's not something that you have to do, but if you do it quarterly, and you have an RSVP where you're checking in on the roles, the strength, the values, and the purpose of your employees, it keeps that continuing conversation. And as always, soft skills seem to be so hard, but it's really just work it if you want to work it, and be able to manage it within that leadership development and leading phase of constructive feed forward.
Excellent. So you've already gotten like kudos from the people loving the Georgisms there. We're always guaranteed to get at least one or two in a session. So there's our first one, I think, for the day. Thinking about, I'm going to feed this back to you, whether you like it or not. Let's move you forward, and that's where your heart is, and they can hear that, they can feel that. Versus, can I list the things you did wrong yesterday, George? You got a few minutes? It's going to take a while. I'm going to have to go through this very long. No, goodness, no one wants that. All right, wonderful. Let's save some of the other ones. I know we flagged a couple of great comments. We'll save some of the other ones for our back and forth at the end, because I want to keep close to the schedule. Next up, I'm so excited. Deborah is in the chat. So y'all say hello to Deborah Squires. I'll make sure and tag her again, because she's in the chat. She's engaged. She's active. She's giving her own inputs and feedback, even on the other sessions here from these other leaders. And so Deborah's with Bonusly. We're going to hear from her some key things about how recognition, some of these things we're talking about here already, some of the big picture themes, how we use these to build high performance teams, how we enable our managers to be better at their work. And it's a great, great conversation. I'm so excited, Deborah, for you to be sharing with the audience here. And let's get out of the way, George, and bring Deborah on. I know you've been getting some good takeaways, some good ideas already from the sessions, and I know that you're going to get some great ones here. I'm so excited to be here with Deborah Squires. She's the Chief Customer Officer over at Bonusly, and they're supporting the event today. And Deborah was kind enough to spend some time with us, really diving into some things that she feels strongly about, cares deeply about, and it's going to help all of you think more critically about engagement and how to support your people. So Deborah, before we dive into some of the fun stuff we're going to talk about today, would you take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, please?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Bonusly. I feel like this role is the coming together of everything I've done throughout my career. Our vision and our mission here is to make work better. I started my career in in-house HR departments way back in the 90s, and I've always had a passion for making work better for the people that I work with. That transitioned into working in HR services and HR tech or work tech. And I was introduced to Bonusly last year and really found the opportunity to do something compelling here. As a customer success leader, I understand that the way that you deliver an exceptional customer experience is through an exceptional employee experience. And that's what we get to do with our customers. We really get to put our people managers into the people success manager role. There's a strong correlation on the impact that we're having on our customers and enabling the HR practitioners and their managers to have greater impacts on their team. So the mission of making work better really is what attracted me to Bonusly and what keeps me motivated each and every day to work with our great customers and all the things that they're doing in their workplaces across the world.
That's so exciting. I love hearing someone who it's kind of the same path I've taken where you start out in HR, serving, loving, supporting your people, doing all those kind of things, wearing all the hats. Then you get a chance to step outside of that and then serve back to that audience that you were at one point. And it's just a different level of joy that you get. And so that's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. And I know the audience out there is like doing the virtual applause that we've got one of our own here to share with us and to talk through some of these things today. So I'm excited you're here. Would you kind of kick us off a little bit? Everybody's talking about this big topic. It's obviously something we're going to be talking about in the research later on. We share some of this today, but employee engagement, it's a big conversation. Lots of organizations are trying to figure out, how do we support this? What's going on in that space today? What's the realities?
Yeah, the realities are pretty tough. The last few years, no surprise, organizations, talent leaders, employees have been dealt a really tough hand. Mm-hmm. If you take the global pandemic, which created real human loss, fear, ambiguity, and massive change in the workplace and the world of work, and then you go to a 100% remote work environment where you're not sure what's happening and all of your processes don't sync. And so our teams and companies really had to migrate to that. And now we're in this place of debating in office versus hybrid versus remote first. And we've got some leaders and big companies declaring return to office mandates, which many employees are not signing up for today. You've got that on top of tough macroeconomic market conditions, layoffs, turnover, low morale, and quiet quitting. And so employee engagement has really suffered. In fact, employee engagement numbers are as low as they've been since 2015. It's really kind of amazing how significant the impact has been on engagement. And it's not an inexpensive problem. Disengaged employees cost organizations 34% of their annual salary. If you quantify that across all companies, it's a $322 billion with a B dollar impact in lost productivity and turnover globally. 54% of employees have cited leaving a job due to lack of appreciation, which is correlated to employee engagement. So it's a real problem with real tangible impact. But the beauty of it, if there is some silver lining, is that it's a controllable problem. It does not have to it does not have to be this way.
Yeah. I'm thinking when you talk about engagement, it's easy to get caught up in the numbers. And I don't know what you about think about over the years, people who we've lost to other teams and things like people who've left the organization. That's what I picture when I think of this, is someone who gets so disconnected that they eventually leave. Like, goodness, I think about that high performer on our engineering team, the great accountant who knew how to do all the spreadsheet wizardry and everything else, could solve any problem anyone in the team had. Like those kind of people, it's easier or harder, I don't know which, but when it's very high levels and you boil it down to I remember when Jill left our team, like how that felt, that hurt. And that's what I think of when I think of engagement, because it's talked about this clinically sort of thing, but it's really a people problem. So talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind. The answer to this, I think, right, when we get our people engaged, when we get them connected, they're able to perform, they're able to stick around, we get the benefits of everything that they bring to the table. But it's not as simple as, there we go, wonderful, Deborah's engaged. There's more to that. So talk about how that piece fits into team performance.
Yeah. So let's start by just showing the compounding impact of the problem, and then I'll build on how that impacts performance.
Okay.
So disengaged employees are burnt out.
Okay.
And that leads to challenges for managers who have a lack of team cohesion. They're dealing with turnover and impacted productivity, other disruptions to the team dynamic. And the manager dilemma is actually exacerbated by the fact that managers are often promoted into their roles without proper training or support or tooling, and they are dealt processes that aren't really conducive to having them bring out the best in their people. So that has an impact on the organization as a whole, with higher costs, lost productivity, overall poor culture, the inability to hire the talent that you need, and the inability to retain the talent that you need, and managers who are burnt out. So really, our view of employee engagement and performance is that you build high-performing cultures by delivering employee recognition and feedback that amplifies wins, connects teams, and shares insights. The result is really employees who love where they work and are engaged and deliver business results that drive your company forward. Really, this is the key to getting to that discretionary effort that is so critical to driving business performance. Recognizing employees motivates them, it enables their performance. And when they're recognized at work for what they do and also who they are as humans, they're more connected to the mission, they're more motivated to perform, and they're excited to bring discretionary effort to their roles. So managers really play a critical role in all of this. They're on the company front lines, supporting, coaching, and guiding their employees. They receive exclusive real-time feedback through Bonusly, for example, on how their teams are connecting and collaborating. This is really critical to creating a culture that is vibrant and creates a sense of team. So empowering managers with data really empowers high performance. And we haven't historically in the workplace made that easy. We really believe that employees are key to business success, and effective, timely feedback, both positive and constructive, enables strong performance. It's essential to driving high-performing cultures.
Do you have any data? You obviously see a lot of customers using Bonusly, giving feedback to their leaders, giving feedback to their teams, all those kinds of things. Is there a frequency, or is it just doing this that really starts to make that change? Because I know that I've had leaders in the past that work with us who are like, is it 2.7 times a month? Is that enough to get people happy? I'm like, this isn't a mechanical process. There's a lot of variables in this, but what do you see when it comes to that? Is there anything that correlates with, hey, as soon as the leader starts doing this, here's the change, or over time, this is what people expect? Anything you can share there, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few things. Manager feedback to employees is really critical, but just as important is peer-to-peer feedback. A manager sees an employee from one point of view or perspective. When you engage the rest of your team in providing feedback to each other, you actually eliminate this point in time type of performance feedback that you get in traditional performance management, which we all know is pretty much dead. We use it still. It's a compliance-driven process, but it's not an organic process that delivers feedback to people in real time to reinforce what they're doing well and to give them those little pointers that help them improve and increase their impact. So we find that a manager or top-down driven feedback culture is not the most effective. An organic peer-to-peer cross-company feedback culture is really what drives ongoing performance enablement. It actually improves a manager's visibility into the impact that their team is having because they're seeing it from all points of view. And it empowers other team members to understand who's excelling in different areas and who they can link up with to learn new skills or to tweak their approaches to having impact in the workplace. So it really unleashes the collective capabilities of an organization when you structure feedback as organic, ongoing and across all levels in the organization.
I'm so glad you brought that piece of it up, because one of the things we saw in some research a few years ago was that the peer-to-peer piece was one of the top things that high-performing companies did. They brought that in. It wasn't just manager saying yay or nay, but everybody around you has a little bit of a perspective on your performance. And so them being able to say, hey, listen, I know nobody else was there, but I saw Deborah and how that customer came in so upset and walked out with a smile on their face, and she's incredible, like what she did here. And so bringing those things down, I think, is so powerful. There was a great story I read a few years ago about an organization that was looking at how feedback flowed in their company, because they said the same thing that you said a minute ago. So many of us pick these leaders and we don't train them, we don't prepare them. Like, they end up in these roles because of how long they've been here or because they're good at their job technically. And so they said, what if there's a better way to pick leaders? And so they looked at the organization and said, those people that are in individual contributor roles who are giving a lot of feedback, we're not paying them to do that. They're not incentivized to do that. They're doing it as a natural course of how they work. What if those people could be slotted into leadership roles because they're doing one of the things that's hard to get leaders to do overall? So started looking at that as a signal for succession planning. So I love bringing that into this conversation, because it's easy for us to sometimes think it's only top down, and there's a lot of other things happening under the radar, especially as you mentioned, like remote, virtual, hybrid workplaces. The manager may not even be in the same place to be able to see all the good work someone's doing.
That's absolutely true. And if you think of onboarding new hires in an age of completely remote environments, they aren't getting the water cooler conversations or the break room chats over lunch where they're learning from their peers what's going on or making those real connections. And so this gives you an opportunity to really leverage the collective capabilities of the team. Not everybody wants to become a manager, but most people show up to a job because they want to have impact for themselves, for the people that they work with, and for the company. And giving them a venue or an avenue to do that is really powerful, not only for the individual who gets to participate in that, but also on the culture and on the business performance.
So anyone out there listening right now, I want you to take a second in the chat and let us know if you are using some way, or if you have a way to let others know how they're doing, to give them a thumbs up, or to say, hey, I caught you doing something good. If you have a way to do that, peer-to-peer recognition, if you're doing something like that, I'd love to hear. Just drop in the chat, let us know if you're doing that, because I'm curious about it, because I feel like this is a powerful opportunity, especially as we're getting more dispersed and spread out, a way to keep us feel connected and closer together. I know we'll have another session here at the event today talking about the importance of connection as a bigger piece of this puzzle. Deborah, you mentioned a minute ago, giving managers access to data and information, giving them a sense of what's going on. What sort of things can they get from a tool like Bonusly? Is it just showing them, keeping track of all that so they can see what's happening instead of it being Post-it notes stuck on someone's monitor or something else? Do they see how they stack up against other leaders in the organization potentially from a benchmarking perspective? Like, help us understand what that looks like, because I think that kind of thing makes this clear for me. And I know those managers who are very data driven would probably latch onto that sort of thing, because like, I'm not sure I know how to talk about how I feel about how someone performs or something. Like, feelings, like maybe this makes it a little bit easier for them to see this in a sort of data driven way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So organically in the platform, they can actually pull up and see who are their team members engaging with. They see an ongoing feed of accolades that are coming across the organization. They can isolate to their team or their team members as they're going into one-on-ones. It allows them to better personalize going into a one-on-one, to talk about what they've seen the team member have impact on over the past week or 2 weeks since the last one-on-one. We also surface up historical insights on the team members' feedback. So managers have unique views in Bonusly that allow them to see what their team members have received feedback on, what they're seeking feedback on, as well as where they've been receiving accolades from other teams and the impact that that has had on those teams. So really just making it simple for managers to go into one-on-ones, to go into team meetings, to go into review cycles with information that's been consolidated for them. As a manager who's managed 12, 15 people in the past, having to do that many reviews at one time can be overwhelming. So you're looking, yes, so you've got recency effect. Like, we don't make it easy for managers to bring their best to help their team members bring their best. So you're looking through emails, but inevitably what happens is it's what I remember, which is in the last couple of months, right? And so, and heaven forbid you're the last employee in that review cycle to get your review. It's not as great as the first person. So all the tooling allows you to do is consolidate this in a way that's meaningful to allow you to see trends. What hashtags are they being cited for that aligns to company objectives or values? How engaged are they with their peers? If they're a senior individual contributor, how are they contributing to others? What feedback are they providing to help grow future talent? So it really simplifies it for managers, which is what managers really need. They deserve to have the tooling and the support in place in order to bring out the best of in their team members.
I thought I heard you say this a minute ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you say things people are asking for feedback on. Is that
Yes.
So like I can say, hey, I'd like some input on how this thing is going, or how am I doing with this? Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Instead of just waiting to see, let's hope they tell me how I did on that. They get to make that request either of their leader or of others around them who are working on
Of their peers. Yes.
Okay.
Of their work teams. Yeah. It's a really powerful capability.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about the times where you're working on a team, like, I hope this worked out. There's a really great piece. I probably mentioned it before on one of our live streams, but a book I read a few years ago talked about kind and unkind learning environments. And in an unkind learning environment, that's the work HR does every day. There's virtually no feedback loop. You may make a decision today and not know for 6 months or ever if it was the right decision. You never know all the variables and parameters. We're just making our best guess based on the limited information we have. And because that's hard, and you may not ever know, like, how did that turn out? So from the employee perspective, being able to say, hey, how'd that go? What can I do better next time around? Like those sort of small things. It's never join this team again. You're terrible. It's going to be something like, hey, next time, maybe do this before you start off. And if just little fine tuning helps someone be better overall and gets input when they're asking for it. So I think that's a really
absolutely
piece.
Yeah, it's really powerful, and it really puts development, the power for development, into the hands of the employee, so they can focus on what's important to them, and they can be candid and transparent with their peers to get that feedback. Like, what's one thing I could do to improve my presentation skills? Make it really simple, make it digestible, and let employees really engage in driving their own development efforts through the power of tooling.
One of the other takeaways from what you shared earlier, Deborah, I think is so powerful for everyone listening and here to really catch, is you talked about engagement at this sort of company level. Like, it's about us performing as an organization and hitting our goals and competing in the market, all those things. But this is also about that individual and how they're feeling about work and how they're feeling about that leader who's engaging with them and the team that they're on, and how they're able to either do or not do their best at work, whether we're supporting those sorts of things and really enabling that. So I like the big picture vision of it is important, because that performance bubbles up to the top. But also as an individual, we all want to show up and do our best work. And if we have the right things around us to enable that, we have the right structure, we have the right support, the right tools, we can actually do that best work and really see the meaning, see the impact of that day to day. I'm glad you bring that.
Absolutely.
You've talked a lot about engagement and recognition, all these pieces that matter so much. I'd love to hear if you have an example of a customer you've worked with, or someone who's probably approached some of these same problems that everybody out there listening right now has already faced. What was their story like, and kind of what were the impact and results?
Yeah, a really interesting one, thanks for asking, Ben, is one where our customer was acquired by a larger entity.
Oh, okay.
And so we thought, this may be a challenge in our overarching relationship with the existing customer, but it became an opportunity with the broader entity. So we began working with the head of talent engagement, and she was really focused on, how do I bring two cultures together? Each of them had a rich history and great team members, but she was looking at, how do I make this feel like it's one team?
Yep.
And so they developed their joint company values, and she actually used Bonusly to reinforce the rollout of the values. One value a week they focused on, they did a brief meeting. They had people use the hashtag, so you can actually quantify the impact of people sharing stories around that value. It also helped her identify where the value was or was not resonating with what the company had initially intended. So it helped them refine their value story over time it became the framework for values rewards or values awards at their quarterly all hands. It really underscored bringing two companies together and increasing collaboration and shared understanding and celebration of the new entity, which was two very successful companies coming together.
That's a wonderful story. And in my head, I'm thinking just a generic company, but the M&A example, so many companies out there I talk to, their HR leaders like, oh goodness, how do we make these things come together? How does this all, there's so many variables out there. And I love that example of really trying to measure the impact. Did this land? Are they talking about it in the way that we want them to talk about it? All right.
Exactly.
Those sorts of things. It seems so simple when you say it right now, but so how many of us would wish for the ability to quantify and understand if the communications and the way we're trying to get our point across is actually resonating with our people?
Absolutely. The impact on culture, really, if you look at effective recognition and feedback, ensure employees are more connected to the company mission and culture, and then employees who are recognized for their work on a frequent and ongoing basis are more likely to be engaged and motivated and bring that discretionary effort. That has impact on business performance. In fact, companies with engaged employees outperform their competitors by 147%. It's not a feel-good initiative.
Yes.
There has been so much dialogue around the softer side of HR or people management. The reality is this has tangible financial impact, and it's good business.
Yes.
To focus on your employees.
Gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up too. I'm always a fan of a stat that shows some impact on the business and on the organization overall. One of the things that you just shared, like this discretionary effort, I've heard that term for so many years. And for me in my head, I was like, that was just, do I produce one more widget? But think about it in a lot of different lenses. For any of you who are doing HR work, like that extra effort, you might be building something, but I come up with a more creative solution. I take that extra time to think how to solve that problem that employee has. It's that little bit of extra, whatever you're bringing with it. It's creativity, it's extra effort, it's that intent to connect with someone else. It's I'm going to mentor that person instead of just saying, well, we'll see how they do. Like all that ties into that. And any of those options are available to all of our employees if we're really enabling and unlocking that engagement that you're talking about here, Deborah. So goodness, so many good things, so many great takeaways. Thank you, Deborah. I'm gonna make sure and link to your LinkedIn profile here into the chat so the audience can reach out, connect with you. Y'all let Deborah know you saw her, appreciated her insights in the session today. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing not just your wisdom, but your passion on this. It's clear, like you get revved up on this just like we do. And thank you so much for spending some time here.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's been great.
Absolutely. To everybody else out there, hang tight for more good stuff coming right up. More good stuff coming right up. There we go. Lots of good inputs there, Deborah. Tremendous job, my friend. Well done. So good. Great ideas, great comments, great. I'm loving everybody sharing like their collective knowledge of what they're trying, what they've experienced. Like we did this, it didn't really work. We're doing this now. It seems to be working for us because this is like a library of free resources for any of us out there that are trying to get better at what we're doing. So all of you that are commenting, that are contributing, I've got this running list over here of names already picked out for some prizes, and stay tuned. Keep on engaging. We appreciate you for being there. And when you're participating like that, you're lifting up the community. So thank you, Deborah, for sharing with us, for bringing some great ideas. George, while I get the next session ready to go, any big takeaways for you or some of the things that you saw that you're like, oh, that's my big takeaway?
Yeah, I think one of the words she was slipping in there a lot was simplicity. And I always think about that because you and I's relationship, man, like we both have things that may be challenging for you that are not challenging for me and vice versa. Like everybody knows, and I'm going to say it because it hasn't been said enough, data. I just wanted to say it both ways for people who are out there that may speak
both languages, data and data.
But seriously, what's simple for you may not be simple for others. And I think that's the mindset that we have to go into as leaders, especially on the development side and wanting our employees to really elevate and enhance their performances. How do we get them there to that place? How do we recognize them where they are? How do we make sure we're communicating and recognizing them in a way that really reflects, what they really love the most? And through this whole process, as Deborah was talking, keeping it simple, the simple way, the simple process, making sure simplicity is involved. And the only way to really do that, Ben, is that I must understand Ben in order to know what may be simple for Ben, right? I got to ask those things. How can we simplify this process? What does it look like, right? And then be able to say that in such a way that's not also seem negative, like as if Ben's not good enough or I'm not smart enough to get it the way it is. But simplifying that process and communicating that is so effective for the growth and development of that person, and then recognizing them as you move forward that, hey, I'm so glad we went through this process. Here you are, you're doing these things. I love the wow wall that's out there. Some of those different ideas to recognize some of the rock stars. We call them rock stars here at Round Room at our building. We got a bunch of all our conference rooms. We have over 50 different small and large conference room here, Ben, and they're all different type of musicians, right? And so when George wants to go and you want to recognize George, one of the two things that's on my office door is that my favorite bands are this, who's your favorite music? And we go to that room. Why do you take me to Frank Sinatra's room, or why do you take me to Journey's room? It depends on the mood. If it's calm and mellow, take me to Frank Sinatra. If I'm really excited and you want to help me achieve a goal, don't stop believing, baby. So we go to those rooms. Those are just different ways we recognize our people. So I love seeing everybody else's ways as well.
Yes, absolutely. That we used to do very simple stuff, but once we expanded beyond one location, it suddenly became this thing where I was like, how am I going to make sure this scales up to our people who are in an office in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, or our people who are going to be traveling from site to site in Oregon and New York and Atlanta and South Carolina? I've got to make sure we accommodate those kind of things. So I really appreciated, again, Deborah sharing some of those ways you're doing it. In the audience here, y'all are chiming in with some great ideas and stuff. And you just mentioned a thing, George, there on connecting with the thing that matters to that person. And we're going to hear from Michelle in this next session. That's one of the things that she really highlights how they do that well at her organization.
Awesome.
So, all right. So good takeaways. Appreciate all of y'all for being here with us, for hanging out. We have about, less than 90 minutes left in our session today. So we're going to dive right into this. We're going to hear from Michelle Polito. She's at Rothy's, and I am not a fashion person. Okay. Probably no surprise that the dad of a bunch of kids is probably not a fashion guy. George is the fashion half of this relationship. And so until I talked to Michelle, I had never heard of Rothy's before, but they do sustainable fashion. So they make shoes out of recycled things. Is way oversimplifying it. And she'll give us like a little kudos or a little shout out in what they do. But they talk about how they give things to their people they care about and tie it back to that mission and vision of the organization and their impact on the world. So let's get out of the way. Let's hear from Michelle about some of the stuff they're doing over at Rothy's to create more connection with their people and to really recognize them in the way that they want to be recognized. Welcome to the session here today at the event. I'm so excited to have you here with us, and I'm thankful to our friends over at Goody for putting me in touch with Michelle Polito from Rothy's. She's a Senior Vice President of People and Workplace there, which I think is an awesome title. And I'm so excited to talk to Michelle today about serving our people, aligning with the business, really making sure we're doing the right things and creating an employee experience that doesn't just deliver on the needs of what our people want, but what the business needs from the people as well. Kind of a combination there. So Michelle, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get into some of the fun stuff, start talking HR speak for a little bit, take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, please.
Absolutely. So as Ben said, I'm Michelle Polito, and I lead the people and workplace teams at Rothy's. Rothy's is a sustainable company. We make sustainably crafted, stylish shoes and bags for men, women, and kids. We've got about 150 employees in our corporate office based in San Francisco, another 150 or so across the US working in our stores that are now popping up in all the major metropolitan areas. And then we also have about 600 employees in our wholly owned factory in China, where we make all of our products. And as the head of people and workplace, I'm responsible for really designing and implementing the talent strategy in support of our business priorities, and then executing that across all the key HR functions, right? Everything from talent acquisition to talent management, employee experience, and people operations. And then also the workplace team, which is responsible for all of our physical workspaces as well as events. I've been practicing HR for almost 30 years, which makes me sound really old. I don't feel that old. And I've worked at companies of all sizes, literally from the largest at Walmart to mid-size and startup companies. And what I have found is that my sweet spot and where I really feel like I can make an impact is in small and scaling companies, really helping build that people strategy and foundation to help a company grow. And so I'm thrilled to be at Rothy's, and I've been here for about 5 years.
That is so wonderful. Just, I love all the combination of everything you share there, from the developing the strategy, which in some cases seems like the hard part, but actually making people do the things is the hard part. Usually behavior change is the hard part of what we do day to day. And the physical workplaces and events piece of your job too. I hope to get to that a little bit in the conversation, because I'd be curious to know more about that aspect. So when it comes to employee experience, you covered a lot of things in the work you do, and even in the types of workers and the type of work your people do is very varied. So what is your biggest priority when it comes to employee experience and serving the team at Rothy's?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, there's a couple of things, but first and foremost, it's really making sure that we are connecting and aligning the employee experience with business priorities. So how do we ensure that our team is focused on the right things so that they're making an impact and seeing that reflected in the business success? So as companies increasingly are focused on the bottom line, we just cannot afford to have employees working on things that are not moving the ball forward as it relates to our priorities. So making sure that we're all on the same page as far as our goals and focus areas is really, really critical. And I think part of that is also making sure that employees understand and are aligned with the purpose of our organization, right? And seeing how the work that they do is in support of that purpose, and that they understand that connection. It's not always obvious, especially in the world of people, right? Our teams are, busy working away, oftentimes very much behind the scenes. So helping them see how they are working in support of our customers and in support of us driving sustainability and doing things better for our customers, our people. That is something that you can't take for granted. And I think it's important to be really overt about drawing that connection for folks so they can see, again, the impact that they're having on the organization. And then the second piece I think that's really important is making sure that your employee experience really resonates with what chances are a very diverse team, right? We've got, it's no longer the case where you can just say it's a one size fits all approach. There are so many generations in the workforce today. They're, boomers to millennials to Gen Z. We've got them all at Rothy's. And the way work gets done is so different now, right? You've got people that are working in the office, you've got people that are remote, you've got people that are hybrid, right? As you talked about or called out, at Rothy's, I've got people that are working in a corporate office. I've got half of my population is working in a store, maybe part-time. So there really isn't a one size fits all approach. You have to think about the vast needs and differences in your population and be able to be creative and adaptable to come up with an experience that resonates for all of those folks.
Goodness. One of the things I want to ask you as a follow-up to that, you talked about creating that alignment, really building that connection between what the workforce is doing day to day and helping them see how that either aligns with the bigger goals of the business, you talk about the mission and impact, obviously, but the mission of the business and the goals there. Is that through like communications? Is that through making sure their managers are equipped to have those conversations? Is that through put it up on the bulletin board in the office and everybody's good to go? Like, obviously you have people in all these different types of work they're doing, from frontline workers to the office to everything in between, even your team over doing manufacturing work in China, right? So how do you get them to understand that? Because I hear people say that, and you're like, how do we make that leap from that's a good thing to do to here's how you make it practically work for everybody else?
It's all of the things you just described, Ben.
Okay. Yes. And
I remind my team, I remind my fellow executives, right? If you feel like you are a broken record, chances are you probably could still communicate it a little bit more. So it is at every opportunity, how are you communicating that, right? And every all hands meeting, in every touch base with your team, as you're reviewing your goals and priorities and working through that with each team member, how are you drawing that connection? I think especially important in the people world, right? Again, we sometimes fall into this trap of like, we're just about the people, but we're really about enabling the business to achieve its goals, right? So how do we design programs and processes? How do we hire the right talent and develop people to achieve these goals? and in support of the priorities. So you really have to do it at every turn, and you should feel like a broken record, right? I want everybody on my team to be able to cite, here are the 3 key business priorities that Rothy's has this year, and here's where my work makes the biggest impact, right? So it's making sure that there is that alignment and that connection. And again, doing that in your team meetings, in your all hands meetings, when you're reviewing your goals and objectives, when you're having your touch bases, it has to just be kind of part of the daily conversation, I find.
I appreciate you diving into that a little bit deeper, because one of the things we found in our research recently is that employers who have a very highly effective approach to managing performance of their teams are more likely to say, we talk about what we're trying to do as a company and how that person fits in, just like you just shared. So there's a great alignment there. And the companies who are more ineffective don't do that nearly as often. So I can't say that causes all that, but I definitely believe, and especially hearing you talk about this, it feels like there's a real connection there.
Absolutely. And I think you just can't take it for granted. And I think especially as a leader, right, you're in different conversations than your team is in. And so you can't assume that they're hearing the messages unless you are explicitly sharing them. So we actually, as a leadership team, when we have our monthly results, we all say, okay, now we are responsible, each of us, for sharing these results with our teams, right? So it kind of makes sure that we're all on the same page in terms of getting that information and updates out to our teams, and making sure that we all of our teams, whether you're in a back of the house function or you're, front and center interacting with customers, but we're all hearing the same information.
All right. So one of the things I want to ask you about, we've heard some great ideas on like the strategy and the big picture stuff so far. I want to take it kind of tactical for a minute. And one of the stats, same research I mentioned a minute ago, one of the stats that we found in that was really intriguing to me is companies that see ROI from their employee experience investments are those that are doing things more frequently. So reinforcing more frequent touch bases with their people, more frequent one-on-ones, more frequent recognition moments, things like that. And I'd love to hear from you. What value do you think things like recognition bring in terms of outcomes in the workplace?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's no question that most of us feel really good when we understand and are appreciated for the work and the impact that we're having, right? We want to, I think in our employee survey data, we've consistently seen recognition as one of the most important factors for people feeling engaged at the company. That said, I think that not everybody wants to be recognized the same way. And so I think it's important to, one, make sure that you are consistently recognizing and appreciating people. And we know that those who are recognized more often and receive that consistent recognition are more likely to be engaged, which means they're more likely to stay with your organization. They're more likely to be amongst the most productive members of your team as a result of that engagement. But again, recognizing that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and not everybody wants to be recognized the same way. And so that means that you have got to do the work to understand what's important for your people. And remember that. As an example, I've got somebody on my team who would be mortified if I called her out in an all-hands meeting to share kudos, right? She would, that would work absolutely against me. And she would say, I can't believe you don't know me, and know that I would be mortified that you did that. But if I called her out in my team meeting or with my leads, or even just send her a direct note, that is something that will resonate with her, right? That is what's going to make her feel seen and appreciated for the work and the effort that she put forth. So I wouldn't know that if I didn't ask. And again, you can't assume that everybody wants to be appreciated the same way or recognized the same way. And so that's important for any people manager to understand the motivations and the preferences of their teams, and make sure that they're incorporating that into, all of their interactions and how they recognize and appreciate folks.
I love the practical lens on that one, because there's probably adjusts over time too, basically, as well, like knowing your people. Because at one point I just want to fly under the radar. No one needs to look at me. Like, let just do my work, and I don't need any extra attention. Okay, I've got enough. And other times, like when I was recruiting or doing something more visible, I'm like, hey, sure, call that out, because I know that was a key part of this thing being successful. And so knowing your people and making sure when we're talking to our managers and enabling them, like, you have to know your people. We can't know them for you. Okay. Don't ask me what my wife wants for a birthday gift. I need to know my wife wants her birthday gift. Okay. And so the same kind of thing applies there.
That's right. That's right. I think it doesn't take a lot, right? It's one of the fun things that we do here as part of our onboarding process is we do, it's just like a get to know you kind of questionnaire, and the employee and the manager fills it out. So as the manager, I understand your motivations, what's important to you, both within the job as well as outside of the job. And then you also, as a manager, get to share with the new employee, like, here's how I operate as a leader, right? Here's sort of, what you need to know about me. Sometimes people refer to it as kind of like your user manual. So it's a great way to just kind of uncover some of these things, which, might surprise you. And maybe, different than what you assumed as far as what somebody's motivations or preferences are.
Do you mind if I ask you a follow-up on that user manual idea? Like, I actually I heard someone speak on this in the fall, and they had done this at their organization, and they said, we thought that it would have this outcome, and it ended up having all of these positive benefits, this range of benefits for people, because they got up to speed more quickly. They felt like they were more connected and plugged into people. There was less turnover in the early days because they were like, I'm part of this community now because they know me and I know them.
Yeah.
What does that look like practically? So you said it's kind of just a questionnaire, a couple questions on what makes you tick at work, what kind of work you like to do, what sort of things are in there?
Exactly. I mean, it's like some really straightforward things that you might feel silly asking, or they might be things that you might have asked in the interview process, but guess what? Like, it's a little different once you're actually in the organization.
Now you're in the fence. Now you really mean it.
Now you might answer those questions differently. So it is really just like some very basics, like what makes you tick? What are your stress behaviors, right? How can I support you when you are stressed out? How do you like to be recognized? So again, a very basic, direct question. That is all you need to ask. And when we have new leaders come on board, we take it another level, right? Because to your point, Ben, it's all about how do you accelerate that onboarding learning, right? This is stuff that you might be able to find out within the first 9 days in a typical scenario, but like, why do we want to wait that long? Like, what if we could really kind of put it on speed dial and get through some of that much more quickly? And so we have these questionnaires that are for everybody as they're onboarding within the organization. But then also when we have a leader coming on board, we do a little bit more of an intense process to uncover some of this stuff, right? To get with the team and understand, what is the team looking for in this new leader? And then what do you know about this new leader? What would you like to know, right? All the questions you want to ask that maybe you would take a while for you to get the courage up to ask them, like, let's just surface that in the first weeks and then give the leader an opportunity to kind of digest that information and come back and respond to it to the broader employee population. So it's all about accelerating that learning and not letting it happen organically, but just being more intentional about it.
I like that leader perspective of that too. Like, I'm asking for a friend. No, actually, we all want to know this, right?
Exactly.
One of the things that we used to do is we were bringing a new leader in. After we'd had the technical sort of interview with them and made sure they knew the things they needed to know in order to operate in the business, we had them come back and meet with the team that was working with them and let them get a feel for what they're like, how do they lead? And they would ask those kind of questions like, what is your management style? How do you like to get information? If you're stressed, what would I expect to see from you? Kind of what you're talking about here. And let them get a feel for, is this a person that I feel like I could work alongside and work for that would make me happy day to day? Or, wow, I don't think that's going to work out very well. And so we let them feel that piece of it. Man, I really like that. That's a neat.
You get a very different perspective, right? There's a lot of value, I think, in understanding from the team's perspective, how would this new leader work with us?
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I want to ask like 15 more follow-ups from that, but I have to kind of keep us on time. So I have one more kind of big question I want to ask you before we wrap up here. And it's just kind of broad. So we've talked through a couple things that you've seen be effective in your experience, right? You've run teams, you've led HR, you've been in organizations large and small, all these different industries, and you've seen some different things be effective. What advice would you give to all of our friends here listening and all of these HR leaders who are trying to get this stuff done every day, trying to create their own positive employee experience? Anything that you'd give them in terms of practical advice or wisdom, or here tips in the trenches, whatever you want to call it, based on your own experiences that might help them out?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, kind of going back to the priorities, make sure you're connecting with your CEO and executive team to understand what are their biggest pain points, what are their biggest concerns, and how can you and the people team that you support, how can you help them with those things, right? That is where you will get the most support, the most buy-in, right? Is if you are in lockstep with your leadership team and what they're trying to accomplish, right? So again, it goes back to making sure your priorities are their priorities and that their priorities are your priorities. I think that the second piece again is just understanding what motivates your team and how do they want to be recognized, right? And then taking that information and putting it to use, maintaining that flexibility, offering, choices and options when you can. It's super, super important. And I think that, being responsive to your employee needs, but also helping them understand kind of the bigger business context is equally as important, right? So you have to do it with your leaders, you have to do it with your team members, and again, making sure that there's just no daylight between what you are working on and what the business priorities are. And I think just kind of, speaking to a little bit about the choice and the flexibility, when it comes to recognition, again, we talked about like not everybody wants the same things. One of the things I know we talked about our friends at Goody that brought us together. One of the reasons why we really love their platform is that it does give employees choice, right? Not everybody wants a company t-shirt or a hat. They want different things. And with the Goody platform, we're actually able to curate a little bit of a shop so that employees can choose, but that also those options and gifts that they're looking at also reflect our brand and some of the, sustainability, which is super important to us. Like it's reflected in those options. So again, we love that platform for that reason, is it really does kind of support that idea of choice while also reflecting the things that are important to us as an organization. And I think lets employees feel like, hey, I Rothy's cares about me enough to give me a choice and not just say, hey, here's the company swag, take it or leave it.
Yes. Wonderful. Excellent. Goodness. Okay. I've got some good takeaways, some good ideas from this. I know that everybody else out there listening has as well. So I'll just say thank you again, Michelle, for spending some time with us, for sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciated your insight and your encouragement here. We can do some of these things probably better than we have. And you give us some good ideas on how to run that track. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was fun chatting with you. I appreciate you having me on.
For sure. To everybody else out there, stay tuned for more good stuff coming right up. I enjoyed hearing from Michelle so much. And someone asked me, like, did you do this because George loves shoes? No, I did not have the forethought to plan that together. But right there, she was funny because we were talking. She's like, oh, well, this is what it looks like. She showed me one. And when someone shows me a shoe on a screen, I can't think of anybody but George Rogers. So thank you, Michelle. We appreciate you for sharing with us, for giving your insights. I love the personal user manual idea there, especially for managers. We're talking about how to get them more connected in. I think that's a great idea. There's a book, I can't remember if I've recommended it here before, but a book I read years ago called The Myth of Fit. And we always say when a leader joins an organization and we try to vet them, we put them in and they fail, like, oh, well, they didn't fit. And a lot of that comes down to how intentional were we at setting them up for success and connecting them with the people around them and make sure they have the resources. And I loved hearing from Michelle some of the ways they intentionally do that across their team and across their organization to make that visible and make that real and tangible to them. George, what were your big takeaways there? Uh-oh, you were on mute. There we go.
I knew it. I meant to look and see. There we go. The great Greg has visited us again here with us. Now, I think after these first couple of sessions, Ben, and listening to the conversation, and this word is going to shock everybody because it has a lot to do with fashion. You can't wear a shirt. For me, I got the shirt and the shoes have to have alignment, right? My shirt, shoes, and socks is like a ordeal, and so. What I'm hearing is this importance of leaders and employees having a sense of alignment. How does this impact our culture? And I think about, why is alignment so important, Ben? One of the things that I loved from an entrepreneur standpoint about some of the research that we got on this performance piece was that employers are 2 times more likely. This is going to help out all the HR leaders going back to their CEOs or CFOs right here. What's the importance of having a recognition platform and these tools? Well, the employers that we had this research done with said 2 times more likely that giving employee recognition on a daily basis positively impacted their ROI, their revenue went up, right? And so when we talk about this, what is the impact of really engaging with our employees, our leaders taking this recognition to another level, speaking their language? I hear alignment, alignment, alignment. I think of alignment 2 different ways: fashion, and I like to travel a lot. What would happen if my car tires were not aligned properly, right? Driving that thing will be a little bit more difficult. If we're driving and there's a bad wind, having the wherewithal to say, hey, my alignment is off towards the right, but this wind is coming. How do I balance that? And a lot of times in business, we don't think about having proper alignment, not just with business and, from a financial standpoint, but we talk about having alignment with our goals, company goals with employee goals. How does this happen? Employees, connecting with their leaders, the engagement piece that impacts that, the sense of belonging that impacts those things. So far right now, Ben, I'm thinking, man, this workplace alignment is so critical. Looking at the chat, hearing everybody's thoughts and their comments, it all comes down to, man, we got to get better aligned. How do we get more aligned? How do we increase alignment to make sure that we're driving in the right direction that we want to accomplish our goals, not just individually, but together? Because a better Ben accomplishing goals is an impactful Ben that's going to help the company get where they need to be.
That's exactly what Brock said earlier. The company's never going to perform if everybody else is performing that rolls up to that. And like the alignment piece you said there, like both on the company goals perspective, we heard that from several people who are like, this is absolutely essential. It's a key way to make people feel and understand their impact on the bigger goals of the organization. But even Mitzi's like, listen, our values also drive us as a business. And so we have value awards. So Missy, shout out to you on that one, because she said, we want to make sure you're not just looking at these big goals at the end, because if you're achieving it at some way that's counter to how we believe we should be acting, it doesn't count, right? It's not the right way to go. So the how you do it, and we're doing it in a way that's true to what we believe and what we know to be the way that we want to create this workplace from a values perspective also aligns there. So some good stuff there. All right. We're going to be giving away some great stuff. You saw there in the message from Nicholas. We're going to be giving away some great stuff from the Goody team in a little while. They always donate some giveaways to the audience. I've got the list of them already right here, and some of your names are on it. So stay tuned. We'll be giving those away in just a little bit. We have one more session here with Annie Rosenkrantz from HiBob. We're going to talk. George had the opportunity to interview Annie, talk about engagement and connecting and culture and all those good things that we care about. So we have one more session here. We're going to share some data with you, some research that we're finding, things that I think were good takeaways. And it's always hard when you survey 1,000 employers. Like, what do I want to tell you from that? Because there's so much in there. And so we try to distill some key themes and big ideas down for you that you can take away from this today. After hearing some stories, some practical things, here's some of the data on what you can do to make the right impact on your people. So we'll share that, do some giveaways for the end. So let's go ahead and transition into this final session, this interview with Annie from HiBob.
Everybody, I'm so excited. We have a very special guest, my new friend, Annie. Can you tell us just real quick, the audience, a little bit about yourself and obviously the work that you do with HiBob?
Absolutely. Hi, George, and thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Rosenkrantz. I am the Director of People and Culture at HiBob. For those who don't know HiBob, we are an HRIS platform, relatively or a little bit newer to the US, but we've been in the European market for a very long time, and excited to continue introducing our platform to the US market.
Awesome. Our conversation, I want to dive right into it, Annie. We've been talking a little bit before about culture, and I always share it, and I'll share it again today. Culture, to me, when it comes to defining what is culture within the workplace, how does this impact the employees as well as leaders, right? When I think about culture, I always say culture is how most, not all, but how most employees feel, believe, and behave, right? And so how they feel really is something that we as leaders bring upon. How do we make them feel? How are we communicating to them? Because their feeling turns into belief, and their belief is what turns into the behavior. And that really impacts a lot of things, and that impacts the culture, not just the culture, but also the performance and the retention aspect. And I want to dive into this conversation conversation, because when I think about culture, one of the first key things that comes to my mind is communication, right? How are you communicating with your employees? Because how George may be communicated to may be different than how you communicate. Can you talk a little bit about setting the culture in forms of, creating a culture of communication within the workplace and setting those expectations?
Yeah, I think that that last point you just made is what it's all about, is expectation setting. It's what you share with an employee before they even step in the door to interview at your company, to onboard. What is their understanding of the way you all work? Are you hiring against certain values as a company that ensures that when people start on their first day, that they're aligned, that they're a believer in the way that you work, and that they're going to sort of get on board? Not to say that culture fit is there's a big evolution towards culture add, but someone who believes in the way that the company is driving the direction of the organization. So for example, I work and have historically worked in faster moving startup or scale up environments where things change constantly. So it's really important that when we hire new employees to the company, that they understand that the standards today, or the way that we operate today, may likely shift, that the structure of the teams may evolve over time. And that's a good thing. That's a reflection of growth and maturity. But if someone comes on board and joins the company expecting that the way things are today are going to be the exact same a year from now, and are going to be concerned by or stressed out by change, that's probably not going to be a great fit for our culture. So that's just a small example of how cultural alignment and setting expectations around how things work and how things will change and evolve is really, really critical. And then, of course, over time, it's not just when people come on board, but it's over time. And how do you support employees, and how do you communicate that with them? Setting a culture where feedback is the norm, and where when things do change, we're communicating proactively to employees about the reasons behind the change, gathering their feedback, giving them a chance to air their thoughts, their questions, their concerns, so that they feel like it's a two-way street and not change that's being imposed upon them against their will.
Yeah, that's so important. We always say change, and I used to say change without growth. There's no change without growth. You got to have some changes as you're wanting to elevate, not just from a business standpoint, but also as a team, and the importance of those things. How do we as leaders then embody? Because a lot of it is, if there's one thing that employees can do, and that's you really take ownership of the culture. They can't really own the business unless we're going to pay them or give them that ownership, right? But they can own the culture. How can we then embody that change? You said a couple of key things. Feedback is important. You talked about that as well. But when it comes to the importance of the organization's workplace culture and how it aligns, as well as the personal values, one of the stats in our new piece research is that when we ask the question, how important is it for organizations' workplace culture to align with their personal values, 55% of employees say, you know what, this is very important to me. Like, this is something that really matters. And so when we talk about change, we talk about the communication and setting up expectations. What's a guideline? What's a strategy that we can do as leaders to help that with our employees, to really connect what they desire and really know that to how we're going to function as an organization? Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Absolutely. I think one of the things I've learned over the last couple of years in my role is the best solutions are often informed by or led by employees themselves, that we as leaders don't always have to have the answers to how things should be or can be done. So the more we involve our employees in this providing and framing the solution, the better they're going to be bought in, and oftentimes the better the solution will be. So I think about, even smaller things, like we have a really large segment of our US population that works remotely. And we were really struggling to figure out how to engage them and what sort of programming they wanted. And I, as a New York office employee, didn't have all the answers because I wasn't living there. I didn't know what it was like to be fully remote. So rather than trying to get a room full of New York office-based employees to come up with the solution, we did focus groups and we ran a survey and we said, what do you want to see? And we let them provide the solution. So that communication, one, they really bought into the solution. Two, they see us trying and working with them to make a fix and to make their experience better. And overall, I think it helped make them feel more engaged, believers in the product and the company. And I think long term, it will have impact on retention in the company.
That is so true. When I hear you say these things, it's, essentially giving them a seat at the table, that those things, like how do we get people there? And that's important. So employees do not feel like, hey, it's always coming from the top to bottom. We never feel included. There's a diversity there in the change management that goes along. So I really love that. How then, because culture obviously then is a huge importance to the workplace. I believe culture really impacts performance. I believe that there's a connection there. So it's the CPR. When I think about culture, performance, and retention, I really believe how do we give CPR? How do we give life to our employees, to our workplace, to our leadership? Because one of the things that we noticed when it came to performance practices in today's world from an employer standpoint, the focus really has been, how do we engage with our employees? How do we create this culture where people want to come here? They have a sense of belonging. How can HR then and management create a culture, not just a communication, but also a culture of support, a culture of empowerment that really fuels employees' performance and satisfaction from that standpoint?
Yeah, so it definitely comes back to transparency and communication. But like you said, if you build the trust in the relationship with the employee, they are going to want to deliver more for you. If they feel like you care about them, they're going to want to give back to you and make you look good. So I think about in cases where we've had employees going through hard times in their lives, it's highly valued employees who are struggling personally. And we could have, the manager could have said, good luck, we'll help you out as much as we can, but this is a personal situation. But what really has an impact is when you go a step further, when you check in on them regularly, you maybe send them a gift basket or some time off that's outside of the normal scope of time off that you would normally offer. Going above and beyond for the people that have given a lot to the company means that when their personal situation settles, or when things are back on track, that they're going to want to give back doubly to the company, and that will have impact on their own performance and the success of the company overall. So doing the right thing by employees, building a really strong, authentic culture has an inherent impact on the company overall at the end of the day.
Yeah. So when I think about that, I always have this, I'm an acronym and quote junkie, right? So I'll just share another one of my hidden gems that I like to share is inspect what you expect. As leaders, as management, whatever you're expecting from your employees, every once in a while, we got to inspect that. We got to make sure that we are providing all the resources and the tools, that we are giving our employees exactly what they're needing. One of our things that popped out to me in this research as well was the top primary goals for performance management. From the employer side of things, the top 4 that I kind of want to just share a little bit about, and I'll share all 6, but which one of these, as I mentioned these, which one of these really stand out to you? So the top 6 primary goals of performance management was improving performance. It was developing career growth and succession plans was number 2. Number 3 was measuring performance. How do we measure this performance that we're expecting? Number 4 was setting and defining goals. And then number 5 was, how do we retain high performers? How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them wanting and desiring more? How do we grow and develop them to the next stage so they don't get worn out, they don't get disengaged from the conversation or the work that they're doing? And then number 6 was identifying the skill gaps. And so those were the 6 primary goals. Which one of those goals from a performance management really sticks out to you, both as a HR management perspective, but also the thoughts of employees, how we stay connected?
It's hard to choose just one. There are 3 that stand out to me, but I'll try to give a narrow, focused response. So the ones that stand out to me most are the career growth and career pathing or career succession planning, identifying top performers, and skills gap. So one of the things that we're talking a lot about these days, I guess I'm leaning in the direction of skills, the skills gap identification, is with AI becoming a much bigger topic of conversation lately. There's all of this discussion around, will the skills that we have today be relevant tomorrow? And what do we need to be investing in as employers to make sure that the people that we have today are the right people, continue to be the right people for us a year from now and 5 years from now? So I would lean on that as something that it's a really interesting area. How is technology going to change the way that we all work? And how can we invest in our people so that they have a career here, that they're not just in a role today that won't be relevant tomorrow? So it's both beneficial to the company. We don't want to lose people and have to rehire new people for different jobs. It's much more cost effective for us to train the people that we have. And then for employees' sake, they want to stay. Ideally, if they love the culture and they like the people, they're going to want to stay at your company, which means we need to invest in their career growth as well. So I'm kind of touching on two areas here, but those would be the things that I think are topical and should be for every company today.
So we talk about the performance, we talk about the culture. One of the biggest things, and one of the things that I just shared on that research was keeping those, high performers. Retention is a huge key right now. Because a lot of the hiring practices and things that we're seeing is a lot of employees are want to be connected with companies and organizations that values, and I shared that earlier, the personal values are aligning with the companies, that they have a company that they can go to where their leaders are creating a sense of belonging, that they want to stay there, right? And so they want to be connected with leaders who are respecting, accepting, and appreciating them for who they are and where they are. When it comes to the culture, the performance, how does that then impact retention? What are some things that you can do as a leader, as a company employer side of things to say, hey, this is how you stay engaged and keep those high performers, or develop those who are not necessarily high performers, but also people that you feel like has the potential to do great things and develop them. How does that impact the retention?
So every piece of data that's been collected on the topic of retention comes back to a couple of key areas. You already mentioned feeling like their values are reflected in the company, that there's alignment in terms of the beliefs and values. So companies that invest in doing good in the world in some way that is aligned to their people, that's critical. Management investing in leaders and making sure that the leaders are supportive, that they are constantly upskilling their team members and challenging them. Top talent generally wants to be challenged. They're ambitious, and they're going to want to continue to learn. So employers need to invest in learning if they want to retain those individuals. At the end of the day, though, the one thing I always come back to is that you need to understand your people. And not every single person at your company is going to want the same thing. Some people may be money motivated. Some people may be learning motivated. Some people may want a culture where they can clock in at 9, leave at 5, work hard during those 8 hours, and then go home and be with their family. So the relationship between the employee and their manager is so critical, because the managers are the closest to those people to understand what it is that motivates them and what keeps them engaged. And we need to be much more specific in how we address those individual concerns so that we retain the people in the way that is meaningful to them.
Yeah, that goes a long way with really aligning performance practices and recognition, right? Recognizing them for their performance, focusing on developing their strengths, having those annual, I always say quarterly goal setting, but having that check-in. If you don't check in with your employees eventually will check out. And so having, as a leader, someone who's constantly checking in, not necessarily, hey, let's sit down for a review, but hey, how are you doing? How are you doing with your role? Has anything changed? What are some of the strengths that are not aligning with what you're doing, and how can we get your strengths? Because if you got a strength as a passionate person, if one of my strengths is not connected to what I'm doing on the data, I might check out a little bit and say, hey man, I could be doing this on the side, or really doing this. So making sure their strengths are really connected, and then their values and purpose. You said something that's very important to me, is as an employee, oftentimes we know what we do, but having a cause, having a why, being able to go out into the community and give back towards something that you're very passionate about. As you mentioned, that community impact has been something that's been rising to the top of a lot of companies' forefront. And that really aligns with the culture. We, as a culture of people, as an organization, we're going to connect with our community. We're going to give back more than just a check. We're going to give back with our hands and be hands-on, feet on the ground with our community. And so that's truly important as well. One last question, Annie, as we move on, but I just want to give you the floor just one last time to share something on your heart, whether it's culture, whether it's performance, whether it's retention, whether it's all of those in one. What's something that's really on your heart going into the rest of this year when it comes to performance and culture and retention?
That's a deep question. I would say what's on my heart is always culture. That, it's been a challenging several years, I guess, for many of us, for many reasons. So, and the job market is a really interesting one right now, where employees have, the power to they could easily pick up and leave and find a great job elsewhere. So building a culture where employees feel like they're safe, like they're what they care about, their employee, that their companies also care about. There's no magic solution here. Culture is sort of you defined it, but it's a sort of an intangible thing. So it really needs to be an all hands on deck approach by companies to ensure that they're building a culture that meets the needs of their talent. So whether it's driving strategy from the top and building programs that, whether it's rolling out important values or investing in philanthropic efforts that align to their employees' desires, or managers being really close to their people and building strong relationships. It's not just the manager's job. It's not just the employer's, the executive team's job. It is an investment by everyone to build a community where people feel like they belong and that they're going to want to invest back in the company. That will have downstream effects on performance, on retention, all the things that hit the bottom line, but it starts with culture.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for watching the session, and we'll be on to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, good stuff. George, you're muted again before you start talking. Heads up.
I was ready.
I love when you get a chance to talk to somebody, because I know it's always going to come into culture, regardless of what the topic is. You're going to bring it back around again and make sure we really hone in on that piece. And Annie, like you can tell, that's just a big focus for them there. I got some good takeaways. I was making notes as well from that session. So great session. I am so pumped. I'm trying to look at my clock to get an idea of what time we have. So we have about 35 minutes. I may later be out of class early today. Don't tell the principal, but get you out of class a few minutes early today potentially. We're going to transition over, and I told George in advance, so everybody else is going to be a surprise for you. But something funny, we're going through the other day, and the little videos pop up, on your memories on Facebook or on Google Photos or whatever else. Like, here's the thing that you probably forgot happened. And one of them the other day, I watched it and I laughed so hard because it made me think about what happens when we are trying to support our employees at work. We would like to think that we're doing all the right things, and our managers would like to think, well, I'm doing the best I can. And it's this sort of like back and forth. Are we doing the right? Are we setting up right? Are we making sure they have the resources? Do they have the right time? Do they even have the bandwidth to do this? And our manager's like, well, if HR was give me this thing. So I want to show you this quick little snippet. Again, made me laugh, made me smile, from my own kids from a couple of years ago, that paints this picture oh so well. Here we go.
Magnets in the box.
No, she did.
Who put the puzzle in here?
No, me and Bella did. I didn't do nothing to that.
Who did?
Bella did.
Okay, so how many of us want to be like, I didn't have anything to do with that, kind of like Bella did when she was 2 or 3 years old there in that little video. So I love that. That's what happens, though. It's a challenge, it's a problem, but it's the reality. And George, as you were sharing some of those data points and things, we're going to start sharing some of the data in a moment, but some of the things you were sharing in that session with Annie made me think about that, because you're like, look, listen, it's about more than anything else. The goal of all this performance, any conversation around that, any policy process, the goal isn't just let's track and keep a record and keep a log. The number one thing was, how do we help people perform? How do we improve this overall? And that's encouraging to me to hear that.
Yeah, I think, the togetherness, I'm trying to focus on this conversation, but I just have Bella, because it's, so off the topic real quick, I went to a Pacer game last night, watched Pacers basketball. As we were walking in I had Dexter, my kid, with me. As we're walking in, I hear George. Some lady's calling my name, and I look over, and it's a high school friend of mine that I haven't seen in 15, 20 years. And Dexter's like, who is that? And I was like, well, that young lady used to get your daddy out of a lot of trouble in classrooms. And she would help just blame somebody else instead of it coming back on me, because she knew I couldn't take one more situation. Believe it or not, I liked a lot of attention in the classroom when I was younger. So I understand that it's never our fault.
Oh goodness. I love it though. Again, I said that earlier in the panel session with Brock and Dana, like it's going to change when we come alongside. And that's what I love about the community that's here right now, because I have yet to see anyone in any comment, any conversation I've had with any of you. When I met you in person, I saw Tanya in the chat earlier, like all of those that I met you in person, I've yet to meet someone that's like, if those managers would just get their stuff together, this would be so much easier. We may think that, but we're not saying it out loud because we know that we've got some responsibility in this too. So we're going to go through and share some data with you. George and I are going to kick it around back and forth. I'll share some things. I'll get his input on it. Again, he's like, I'll let Ben lead because Ben's the data nerd in the family at all times. But I want you all to listen to this through the lens of what can this teach me? What can this tell me about what's happening right now? How my friends in the HR world out there are responding. So I'll show this real quick. So this is what you can expect. There's 1,077 different companies, leaders like you at these companies across the world, talking about how they're approaching this, what they're doing, their biggest challenges and gaps. And you've already heard some snippets probably from us today in the conversation a little bit on things that we think are important, some teasers and stuff. But I'm going to go through, and we'll spend about 20 minutes or so on this before we give away a bunch of stuff. I think we got about 20 or 30 different giveaways to give away, and then we'll wrap up for the day. So for this research piece, this is what we covered. So in case any of you are nerdy about sample sizes and things like that, this should put you at ease. Big survey. And as is probably no surprise, one of the big things that stood out to us across multiple questions, multiple different levels, the ways we cut the data, didn't matter. One of the things that stood out to us is that employers overall were focused on performance enablement, not on performance management, not on how do I keep my thumb on George and make sure he's always doing his stuff. And as soon as I turn away, he's gonna start goofing off. No, like, how do I enable George? What do I do to make sure that we're forward looking in how we're approaching this? And no surprise that the data we gathered last year from the workforce said the same thing. They really cared about a company that focused on that. In fact, many of the workers told us in the survey, I'd rather stay here at my company as long as they're developing me and growing me and helping me perform better. I'd rather stay here than go somewhere else. And that's very contrary to what you see in the headlines. It's like everyone's just waiting for a fantastic way to leave your company. That's not actually what the workforce tells us when we're actually surveying them. So in terms of what this looks like, here's the quick snippet of that. So I've been so nerdy excited about this behind the scenes because 7 years ago, one of the very first studies that I ever did at Lighthouse, we surveyed a group of employers on how they're approaching performance. And so that data set, I've sat on that for all this time. And finally, this was a chance to kind of revisit and see how things have evolved and changed. So for those of us who've been doing HR for more than 7 years, we know it's a different world. And this gives us some ideas of that. What's exciting for me, though, is that overall, the number one answer really focusing on recognition. How do we help someone be better? How do we encourage them? How do we see what strengths they bring? How do I see what George is bringing to the table and focus on that? One of the big takeaways when we did this last time was employers who performed worse in terms of revenue, in terms of customer retention, in terms of employee engagement. The employers that performed worse in all those metrics were much more likely to say, we care a lot about the weaknesses people have. The high performers focus on the strengths, and that's what came out here again. So goal setting as like an annual sort of thing fell down, as many of you were saying in the chat earlier. We can't talk to you once a year and expect you to be engaged and productive and performing on the job. Coaching, all those kind of things. We can go down the whole list here. The ones at the bottom are the ones that should be at the bottom, by the way. Things like stack ranking. I want to tell you the best to the worst employee, or let's just focus on the weaknesses you have. Those are the practices that don't really add a lot of value, but I keep them in there to see, are companies still doing this? And there are some that are doing those kinds of things. Unfortunately, they're still out there. So this is a big encouragement to me, though, that we are forward looking with this. We're not just backward looking. And we're trying to help people be better tomorrow than they were yesterday, honestly. George, anything here that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think it just goes in alignment with today's conversation, Ben, with, the shift highlights the importance of creating that supportive, empowering work culture that fosters that development that we've been talking about, the collaboration, the alignment, because overall, I think that organizations are truly focused on how do we drive the overall performance and success. We want to drive that. We don't want to manage it. We want to empower our employees with the tools that they need and evaluate that accordingly. But we really want to empower them to be able to take these tools and resources to be able to go in the direction that drives that performance and success.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's see what else we have here. So there's one stat for you. One of the ones that stood out to me that I think this may or may not surprise you, but when we asked the workforce how often you get recognized or appreciated at work, like it's often, it's rarely, it's never. Those were their choices. And then we asked employers, hey, how often do you think this happens? And unfortunately, the workforce said there's a gap here, right? And we don't ever get it They said that 3 times more often than employers did in this study. So we think we're doing it more often. We think it's happening more often than it really is. And again, we've come today. This isn't just to point fingers and say we're not doing this right. As we've seen today, lots of comments, lots of great ideas from all of you out there saying, here's the way we approach it. Here's the way that we're enabling our managers to be better at this, to give them the resources they need, to give them a structure or process, to help them build that muscle of recognizing and appreciating their people. I love calling it a muscle, because that means that even if you don't have a strong one today, you can have a strong one in the future if you start exercising that over time. So we treat that like a muscle, not like a switch that's flipped on or off. I either have it or I don't. I just can't give good recognition. That's not an excuse. Your people don't believe it. They want more from you as a manager. And we are telling this to our leaders as we're talking to them from an HR perspective, but that's a reality. Yeah. One of the problems that, George, I know we talked about, this came up in the conversation earlier, and I want to this next slide I want to ask you about, because the thing that stands out to me is when we ask employers, do you do training on how to give performance reviews? The majority of companies say, yes, we do. Absolutely. But then we ask, okay, when do you do that? How do you do that? And one of the things that's concerning to me is the majority of companies here, the number one way that they're training managers is on the process, on the tool, the system, on the documentation. The number one way is, here's how the process works, not here's how you treat people. George, I know you have like a perspective on this, on being focused on the stuff versus focused on the people. What are your thoughts on that one? Did that surprise you?
I will say yes and no. It surprises me. It doesn't really surprise me much, because I mean, even the slide before where you say workers are 3 times more likely to say they never get it, it just kind of goes into that ongoing gap of employee recognition and appreciation within our organizations, and how we are addressing issues, but necessarily the wrong issues. It's one of those things that, hey, these are both issues. Which one do we jump on? Do we jump on the process, or do we jump on connecting with our people? And in the midst, when I think about this data bin, I'm thinking, how many employees are leaving while we're trying to fix the management side of it versus aligning ourselves with our people, right? When we talk about the retention aspects of this, how many people are leaving because we have a disconnect? We don't have the proper review, and people don't feel appreciated. People don't feel valued. People don't feel respected for the work they're putting in, the time that they're putting in, right? And so that focus is so disconnected. And I think it all boils down to, how do we, as leaders, how do we as upper management, C-suite, whatever you may be, how do we communicate and get that language together? How do we align this communication gap to make sure that we are, focused on the things that need to be focused on first? What are our priorities, right? Yes. It's not all about driving. Now, the number one rule, I want to say this before I say the statement. I understand the number one rule for business is to stay in business. Yeah. If you don't take the number one rule, there is no other rules. Yes. But with that number one rule of driving business is that we have to guard and impact and invest in our people, versus always trying to invest and empower our profits. It's that balance. Sometimes it's hard for entrepreneurs to balance, and leaders. We want to say, hey, we want to hit our momentum. We want to hit our goals. We want to hit our sales. But in the meantime, we're losing and we're dragging that disconnect of our people. And so making sure that we have the proper tools, I think, is so important. And that leadership development side, this is something that I'm very passionate on for organizations to really get into. Is investing in your people, developing those in your front house. And that starts not necessarily always with the tool, but with the people. You can have the best tools in the world, but if you don't have connection with your people, those tools mean nothing. And so you got to have that power. And sometimes your people is the true power that you have, not the tool that you're using.
Well, that was one of the things we heard from Brock earlier, right? When he was talking about, I love seeing the potential in people, and I love figuring out how we can develop that and grow that in them. And that's exactly what he was talking about. So for us as an action item, as a community, as a group of HR leaders here, looking at this data and seeing what it's telling us, we have the ability to influence this. When we teach them about this, it's not just the process or how we do it, but other things in this need to be added in. The other thing, I mentioned this in the chat earlier on, but one of the things that stood out to me in the data is when we asked them, when do you do this sort of training? Well, it's kind of lumped in with all the other stuff. We're like, here's your ethics training, here's your harassment training, oh, and here's how you do performance reviews. And it's all kind of lumped in there together. Instead of saying, you know, we're going to take a moment and set this aside. Here's how the process works. We'll put that all together. But separately, I want to talk to you about what it takes to do this really well. And I want to give you some examples of leaders who are here who set a great example for how this can be done properly and how it drives performance in their teams. Because if we take that little bit of time, even if it's we'll record a little video, we do something like that to make this a little bit easier on us, not to do every single time, but capture some of the information to share back. Managers would love that. They would love for us to be able to tell them, here's some examples of what this looks like, what good looks like. There was a data point I was reading, or a piece I was reading recently. More managers are using ChatGPT and tools like that to write employee feedback. And like, that's as mechanical as it gets. That's not a human connection. That's not a human interaction with somebody. So, okay, let's.
When we look at this data sheet, it's the true factor is this is a process first mentality versus a people first.
Yes.
When we get human back into human resources, right? When we take our humanity with empathy and compassion, grace, and really show that it goes from, hey, we want to be people first versus process first. Yes. And then once we align ourselves with our people, then we'll be able to understand the process that it takes. Because if you're just creating a process, Ben, you know, we see this all the time. Why are we losing people? They don't understand the process because they're not connected. You understand the people, then you can communicate the process. Because, hey, I know what Ben speaks Ben's language. Let me say a data point here as we're going through this process, and Ben's going to be triggered. He's going to understand, oh, this is why we're doing what we're doing. So understanding why people helps you impact your process. What?
Yes. All right, let's continue on. I'm having so much fun with this. So, have y'all all appreciated that I've gotten George to be like much more data friendly now? It's so much fun for me. I love it. All right. So one of the things that we see in the data is that companies are taking multiple approaches to this. It's not just here's our one single approach and we're all betting it all on this one number on the roulette wheel, and hopefully this pays off in connecting our people and helping to engage them and drive their best effort. They're actually using things like performance and recognition tied together. We heard that from Deborah in our conversation today when she was talking about the customer that they were working with at Bonusly that needed a way to connect all the things that they cared about and to reinforce the communications and to find out if people were talking about the right things, like really tracking all of that. So here's what we see overall. When we talk to employers, and what tools are you using? What technologies are you using to support this employee experience that you can be proud of? The number one thing is performance management. It's a great way to keep track. And we've talked about the importance of goals that roll up and all those things. Right behind that was recognition, rewards. Let's make sure they know that they're doing good work. Let's make sure we know we're going to catch them doing something good. I got a chance last week to meet a gentleman named Andre, and he told me, like, his phrase that stuck with me was gossip good. We'd be gossiping good about our people instead of all the other gossip that's negative that flows around. Let's gossip good about the things they're doing and the ways they're performing. And on top of that, if you are an employer out there that wants higher revenue, and I think that's probably all of us, we want revenue increases compared to the opposite side of that spectrum. They're more likely to be using multiple channels, multiple ways to do this, as you see there, that kind of call out. So it's not just one, not just another, but we're using a couple different touch points. And I saw that in the chat earlier when I asked, hey, how are you doing this? I expect it to be, oh, we do an annual survey. And some of us are doing those. And that's a good place to start. But others were like, we're doing these 4 different surveys at different key points in time and this one on the calendar year. And we're also doing, there's a lot of people out there really leaning in here. So if you missed it earlier, go back and rewatch, scroll through those comments as we're talking about that during the first session with Brock and Dana, because you'll see some great ideas from other people who are approaching that in some creative sorts of ways. Okay, George, this next one is, I'm going to just pop it on the screen and give it over to you. You go with that?
Let's run it.
All right, here you go. This is one that stunned me. I want to hear your take on it.
So employees were nearly 2 times more likely than employers to say their workplace culture. Oh, I see it now. Their workplace culture doesn't foster a sense of community and belonging. Alignment is the word again, man. Everything that we've shown so far is really aligning with that gap or the lack of alignment. When you think about, let's take belonging, right? The psychological definition of belonging. We've been speaking and preaching it for a long time. When employees have that high sense of belonging, they say, hey, I feel respected, accepted, and appreciated by my direct manager. And so when there's a disconnect there, when I don't feel respected, maybe I feel accepted, they accept me for who I am, but man, I don't feel like they appreciate what I do or how I do what I do for the companies. When there is a good culture in place, it tells me a few things. Healthy culture tells me that I'm connected with my leader. A healthy culture tells me that there's an open sense of communication, a culture of communication, right? It tells me that there's a culture of constructive or consistent feed forward. We're consistently having conversations where we consistently feeding, the feedback is feeding forward. We're investing in ourselves. And so we're investing in our people, we're investing in our team, and there's a connection there. And so when you have that connection where employees are connecting with their employers, then it's powerful. On this sense of on this side of the table, the data saying employees are 2 times more likely than employers. So the employers are saying, hey, listen, we believe that we're communicating with our employees. We're believing that our leaders are really respecting, accepting, and appreciating our team. The problem is that what employers believe versus the reality of the employees is a little bit different. So employers may think, hey, this is how we're creating this atmosphere, this culture. But the reality is that there's a disconnect, obviously, on the communication of how we are making our employees or believing that our employees are feeling. So employers, yes, we're creating a sense of belonging. We're respecting, accepting, and appreciating. We're creating this sense of community where we're recognizing our employees. And the employees are like, hey, you're not communicating. You're not connecting with me. You're not recognizing me. You're recognizing the group, right? It goes back to that first conversation where here's some pizza. What is the pizza for? Why are we getting pizza? Right. And so having that communication where we're clearly involving everyone, we're effectively communicating. We're not just communicating because I used to always think, man, believe it or not, I used to always think I'm a great communicator until I realized my team was like, we don't understand what you're saying or why. Right. It's one thing to know what somebody is saying, what the company believes, what the values are, but why are those the values? Why are we doing what we do? And that's the disconnect for all, is that employers are saying, hey, there's a disconnect on that communication bin. Employers are saying we're giving it our all. And listen, congratulations, you're making that effort. But it's a wasted effort at times when it's not connecting. That's the improvement that we have to see done a little bit better. And I encourage everybody. And that comes through sitting at the table and having that conversation on what's your language? What makes you tick? How do you love to be recognized? And what makes you feel like you belong, right? What does it take for Ben to feel like, hey, he belongs here? More than just a paycheck, more than just, hey, here's a pay raise, right? There's the inward, it's the, do I fit or am I being filled? I don't want to just fit in with something. I want to be filled. I want to be filled with recognition, not fit around the recognition that's given. As Allison Smart, I believe she said, and corrected, hey, how are we fitting here? I believe I want to be filled. I want to be filled with people that love what they do and who they are doing it with. I want to be filled with grace. I want to be filled with empathy and compassion for others. And I think that's the disconnect that we're trying to align together.
Goodness. I want to the only downside of you not being here with me, George, I can't high five you on that one. That's a
Hey, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
There we go. There we go. I love it. I love it. I knew that was like your playground in that question. And not that it wasn't serious, but that's your place to really stretch, because I know you love talking about connecting those things together.
I'm excited about this next slide for you.
Oh, next one's for me. Yes, it's okay, because it's related to AI. That's my language. So we'll talk about that one. The only thing I'll say here is that we see this kind of thing overall in a lot of different studies. So don't like this. I want this to shock you a little bit to say we can do this better, but it happens every time. There's a little bit of a disconnect in every organization across the board. There's always something that's not exactly how we see it versus how they see it. But this is an opportunity for us to create a more connected group and create a workplace where people really feel like they're the best, as you said so well, George. So I'll transition to this last data point we have for you here, and then I'll wrap up with a story before we do some giveaways. So one of the things that I am super curious about, as you all know, is AI. I'm curious about how this can be a tool that we can use to make ourselves better, to make our organizations better. And so we asked employers, would you be okay with using an AI coach to help your managers? Because these tools are out there right now. You can go and get them. They can help you. Listen, there are AI tools for almost anything you can imagine. There are tools that candidates can use to like fake your interviews and stuff like that. Yeah, you can go check out Final Round AI if you want to take a look at what those look like, because it's pretty creepy, incredible, just decide. But anyway, back to this. So we asked employers about, would you be okay using AI for this? And a portion of them said, no, absolutely not for anything. But others said, you know what? If it helped managers be better, we would love to use that for helping them to figure out how to do feedback. I don't want this to replace their feedback. I don't want this to do the work for them, but I would love for it to say, hey, Ben, this feedback you just gave George, you should probably add some recommendations on how to get better, not just tell him he didn't do a good job. It doesn't help. And we heard that from, again, Brock in the opening panel today, where he says, someone tells me I do a great job. Okay. I don't do a great job. Okay. But I need to know what specifically I did or didn't do in order to get better next time. So that was one of the things that I think was intriguing, because as much as we'd like to think, well, HR is going to be completely unimpacted or unaffected by AI, it's not going to be. It's going to have impacts on the work we're doing. And this is the way we can use it to come alongside us, to support our managers, nudge them in the right direction, make the right choices. And that's so an interesting piece of data there, just to wrap us up on this one. So I'm going to give a shout out, strange and random here. The work we're doing here is hard work. The work that you're doing every day is hard work. I was talking to my kids the other day and like, this teacher's so tough. And I said, you know what? You may look back one day and really appreciate that person. When I was going to school to get my degree in HR, one of my cousins said, oh, you're going to this school, make sure you stay away from this professor. And I go and look on the schedule, and he's the only one who teaches any of the HR classes. So I'm like, okay, good luck to avoiding Dr. Nye. So I get in there and I found out his class was very, very hard. It was tough, but he was very fair. You did the work, you put in the effort. He was super fair, and you could get through the class just fine. And that's all any of us really want. We're looking for an experience at work. Maybe it's tough. It is work. Okay. It's not play, it's work. But we want it to be fair. We want to have the chance to do our best. We want someone who believes in us and is going to expect that from us and give us a place to stretch out and show what we can really do. And so for any of those hard teachers you might have had in your life, those professors, those teachers, any year, any grade, they challenged you. But at the end of it, you look back like, wow, I never thought I could come this far in just a short 9 months, 12 months, or a semester even. And so a shout out to those teachers for doing that, because they helped me to understand that it's not just about, well, I either passed class or didn't, but I want to learn, I want to grow. I want them to challenge me to think in different ways, because at the end of the day, yeah, they're hard, they're tough, they're challenging. My grades may not be as good as they were when I entered this class, but if they're creating the fair environment and letting me really stretch out, the data, the actual research shows that leads to a better prepared student, someone who's more capable long-term. The teachers who just teach you to the test or give you the answers easily, they harm you long-term. That's what the data actually show. So anyway, shout out there. It's kind of a fun little side note for me. So if you want to see some of the data, we're going to start sharing this out very soon. Got some great reports underway, working with the Bonusly team to put out this incredible report aligned with how to support managers at work and how to create better outcomes for their teams and how we can partner there. Not just point the finger, but really partner with them. All that data, we share this completely free with all of you. Just like summer school, just like this event here, we make it free because we want the cookies to be on a shelf where everyone can reach. So you can get those. All right, George, are you ready to do some giveaways? I think I'm ready to
Always.
Giveaways. Let's give some things away. So right here, first up, if you are on this, feel free to take a screenshot if you'd like to. events@lhra.io. That'll get you in touch with me and our team. We'll work with you to get these out, because obviously if you're getting a shirt, I'm not going to just send you one. I'm going to find out sizes and all this other good things. On the books, this I Want to Work in Human Resources book, our good friend, I want to call her Kelly every time, Kelsey put together this incredible book. Again, just a cute thing. I read it to my kids already. It's a fun way to look at HR and teach them about what that means. And so they all know what a firefighter is. They all know what, someone who works at the grocery store, but they don't know what HR is. And it's funny because my third child, he is like, what do you want to do when you grow up? It's like, I want to work in HR, because he sees how excited I get about the work that I get to do alongside all of you. And he's like, I want to be excited about work too. All right. So if you get one of those books, congratulations to all of you for that. And then we had a giveaway, little drawing. So people that commented on the LinkedIn post and tagged someone else and shared that out and tried to expand the reach of this event. Thank you to every single person who did that. I appreciate you so much. Loretta, we did the drawing there. You were the winner there from Cleveland. So shout out to Ohio, George. You reconnecting there.
Buckeyes.
There we go. And our friends at Goody also are supporting this as well. So they picked out 10 of people who were commenting there during the session. Instead of emailing me, they're going to email you. But if you don't get it, go ahead and ping me. I'll make sure and take care of you. Rosario at Goody is going to be the one to reach out to all 10 of you to get something to you and make sure that you get a free prize from them on us, on whoever. They're covering the bill on that because they appreciate you for supporting your people and caring about them. And they wanted to make sure and give you that kudos for it. If you're not on this list and you're like, oh, darn it, I didn't get a prize and I wanted to get one, that's okay. Goody's going to give you a chance to do it for free. So you can check it out on goody.com. You get $20 to make someone's day for free. They're going to let you test it out, try it out. So everyone that wants to get something can get something. I'm not usually like everybody gets a trophy kind of guy, but in this case, why not? Like I said, you're doing the hard work of HR every day. And if you're not getting the applause from anywhere else, we'll get it here from us because we appreciate you. Really quick note on one last thing. And George, I'm going to ask you if there's anything else you want to share before we wrap up here. Credits. I always get the emails after the fact. I'm going to try to start incorporating them here. So you see this, you can go back to the replay and watch it. SHRM and HRCI credits, 2.5 for each of those sessions. Thank y'all for joining us. And thank you again. Honestly, we appreciate you for coming alongside us, supporting this event. The team at Goody doing great work. Both of them gave us awesome people to come alongside us and support as content and sessions to the event that we could learn from. Same as Hi Bob. We appreciate Annie for stepping up and joining us. That was like a last minute recording that came in there and it ended up being incredible. And then our friends over at Achieve Engagement. If they recommended this to you and you came up here, they're our partner. We love and appreciate Barry and Zach and the team over there. So if you came alongside us because of that, because they recommended it to you, we appreciate you for spending some time with us. And with that, George, I'm going to drop this off. Any closing comment before we wrap up the stream today?
Yeah, I think, and it's one of the things that stuck out to me being in the research was when we asked how effective is your performance process and the balance, the difference. I know you're excited about this. I'm sharing data in my closing remarks. But the difference between the effective, very effective versus the ineffective was something that really threw me off when it comes to supporting those people, support your managers and training them. Those who were very effective felt like their performance process was very effective. 94% said that they provided the proper training to support those performance reviews and really helping their managers set up, versus those who were ineffective. Only 40% said that they provided that. And so it goes back to what I said earlier in the conversation, Ben, is inspecting what you expect. If you're expecting something, we got to be able to inspect that, evaluate it, and then invest into it as well, right? And so when it goes to what do we pull from this? How do we get better performance? How do we increase our engagement? How do we increase our culture? I will say these tips, right? Increasing recognition efforts. Start there. How do we recognize and really reveal what is a lack of recognition in the point of connecting? Not just showing up with pizza, but saying, hey, this is what you did, and this is why I want to recognize you on this. But also knowing beforehand what recognition looks like for those individual employees is important. Implementing a culture then of appreciation then goes to the next level. How do we implement that culture of appreciation where leaders are striving to create that culture that's embedded into their organization? I think I love what was said in our second session, aligning the values, right, and practices. How do our goals align with the company's goals? That really helps with that appreciation. It's a big picture then. This is the company's goal. This is your goal. Our companies are hitting goals. You're hitting goals, or maybe you're not hitting goals. How do we help you, support you, right? And so implementing that culture of appreciation really aligns with helping and align with that fostering that peer-to-peer recognition system, as well as one-on-ones and reviews and checking in with the employees. And then the last thing I'll say is seek that feedback, both as an employee, as a team member, and a lot of people that are watching now saying, George, I'm also an employee. I have a leadership role, but hey, I'm an employee as well. Listen, seek the feedback and also adjust to those approaches. Be proactive on what you need as an individual, because I'm always going to say this: take care of you. Leadership begins with self-leadership, Ben. And before I can lead others, I must first lead myself. And that's really what matters the most. Is life is the sum of how well we lead ourselves. And so I want to encourage you, as you're leading other people, as you're recognizing other people, as you're appreciating those around you, show yourself appreciation, recognize yourself, right? And love yourself through that process and journey. And together, we will all have workplace peace.
Yeah, there we go.
Together like that?
I do. I'll have to snip that one piece out, and we'll share that on social, because that's like George at his finest. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you for being here with me as always. It's better because you're here. I'm thankful for you.
I appreciate
everybody
you.
else out there, we appreciate you so much for joining in. To the person who's like, hey, don't forget your amazing introverted commenters. Hey, commenting on a session is as easy as it gets for us introverts. Okay. I am an introvert. I know it may not sound like it because I'm on the stage here virtually, but I am 100% an introvert. You can ask my wife. We go up to the restaurant. She's like, hey, would you ask the waiter something? I'm like, I'm okay. I'll just eat whatever they brought me, but I'm not going to talk to anybody. So I'm with you on that. Chime in anyway. It's going to be okay. It's good for you. It's going to build that muscle to be contributing back to the space. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate you. If you need anything else, we're here for you as always. Have a great rest of your day. Go out there, be great, and thank you so much.